My mom and dad were married in Michigan and divorced when I was 2. So I really don't know my parents to have had a relationship together, but they were really good co-parents. And then when I turned probably around 12 or 13 years old, my mom graduated from X-ray school and we moved to Texas for work. I found myself being very alone in the beginning, especially through middle school. But we made it, and I don't think you could pay me to go back now. I graduated high school in '99, and I wanted to be a police officer. I'm not quite sure what motivated me to go down that route. I've always been kind of a square, never been a rule pusher or breaker, so it was just kind of a fit for me.
In 2002, 21-year-old Amanda Siggers is in her second year studying criminal justice at San Jacinto College in Houston, Texas.
I was a young girl that had the world at my fingertips, really. I was having a decent time with my friends, exploring the city and just living life. One day, a friend and I were preparing for a test, and we chose to go to a local bookstore, coffee shop, and study. We happened to look over, and there was this guy sitting at an adjacent table. He was very handsome. After a while, conversation ensued with him.
25-year-old Cy Ghosh tells Amanda and her friend that he works as a pharmaceutical sales rep, but intends to go back to school.
Cy had told me that he graduated from UT with a pre-med degree. He applied to get into Baylor College of Medicine, and he was accepted, but he denied the acceptance and ended up venturing into something else. He eventually got both of our phone numbers, and I thought for sure he was gonna call her, but he ended up calling me. And I was ecstatic. The beginning of our relationship was very fun. So I was very much a gentleman from the word go, and he really just laid out the red carpet.
He was very, very polite, very cordial, pretty much like Amanda had told me. He was a tall, handsome man, and I knew that she was, she was very smitten.
Culturally, he was very different from me. I found him to be very interesting. Even though he was raised here in the United States, he had a lot of Eastern values. His parents were first-generation Indians. I got to learn a lot about the temples and just the peaceful nature of Hinduism. It's such a beautiful culture. He told me that his father and mother were divorced, and prior to us getting together, he had moved out of his father's home and into his mother's home. He was very uncomfortable at his mother's house. She would consistently be on him, nagging him about something, mostly his career, because in that culture, career and education is number one. They generally live in the home for quite some time, even after college, in an effort to save as much money as possible. And so he was, staying in the house even at an older age because that's culturally just what was of the norm for them. Cy's mother's name is Lipika. She was very much about money, prestige. She didn't care for the union between Cy and I. He relayed that message to me, and I feel like she wanted him to marry an Indian woman and not a white woman. But we chose to look past it. 3 months later, she realized that he was serious about me because he actually brought me home, and we ended up staying the night there. And she opened up the door, and I was there. She shut the door very fast, and Cy had to go put that fire out. She was very vocal about me being a white bitch, and she didn't want that white bitch staying the night in her house. It was certainly a shock, but I knew that he wasn't going to listen to that. I knew how he felt about me, but it was very hurtful. We ended up leaving, and I don't believe I ever stayed the night there again.
Cy's dad, on the other hand, welcomes Amanda with open arms.
Cy's father, his name is Biz. I did not feel like he was racially against me or us being together. I felt like he genuinely wanted to see us succeed in life. He was just a very kind soul.
In late 2002, Biz asks his son and Amanda to come live with him and his current wife, Kay. He has been diagnosed with terminal cancer and wants to spend his last days with his son.
The first few weeks were good. Kay was on board with everything. She knew that we were there to help and not to hinder. But then it started to decline. I could tell that there was tension between Kay and Cy. Cy went on to tell me that Kay would say false things about him. Eventually, it felt like I was walking on eggshells everywhere I went. One evening, Kay cornered me. She said, "You have no idea the person that you're getting involved with. You have no idea who he is, and I would highly encourage you to stay away." At the time, I thought, whatever, I'm in love, and he's so good to me, and he has nothing good to say about her, so it tainted my ability to really take her seriously.
Despite the tension, all three focus on caring for Biz. Until his death in July of 2003, Cy is inconsolable.
He was devastated. Biz was a primary force in his life. And once he passed, I think that Cy felt empty. I think he felt scared. Very different, mentally very different.
Things come to a head when Amanda finds something suspicious in Cy's car.
I found a box of condoms, and it prompted a lot of questions. He became defensive, and it led to a horrific argument, and I started to get a little bit scared. And I had attempted to make a phone call, and he ripped the phone out of the wall. So I made my way to the front door, and I pushed the panic button on the alarm, which immediately sends a call to 911. So I knew that they were on the way, and he knew they were on the way as well, and he left. So the police showed up, and I let them know what had transpired. I did not press charges. It was hours later that he came back, and I vividly remember just being so upset that he was gone, not knowing what was going to transpire, if we were breaking up.
Cy begs Amanda's forgiveness, and Amanda rationalizes that he is deeply grieving and not acting like himself.
I forgave him, and we just chose to ultimately put it behind us. I had a lot of big hopes for our relationship, and I wanted things to be normal again. So I just made it okay. And we were fine. We were fine after that.
In 2005, Amanda and Cy decide to take the next big step.
I was very happy for my daughter to get married. She was very happy about getting married.
And by this time, Cy's mom has accepted Amanda into her son's life.
So we had a Hindu ceremony at the Meenakshi temple, and 2 days later we had the Christian ceremony. My family came to the Hindu ceremony. I had to wear a red sari, red and gold. It was absolutely beautiful.
The highlight was when I saw them walking towards the limousine to spend the rest of their lives together. That's the way it was supposed to work.
I felt like my dreams were coming true. We were in forward motion.
Cy applies to medical school, and life seems on track. Until he does an about-face and pressures Amanda to change her career.
It came out of left field for sure. He was very adamant that being a police officer, that was a blue-collar job. It wasn't acceptable to him or his family, and he made it very clear that it was not where he saw his life going.
Instead, he wants her to go into healthcare as well.
I was to go through nursing school, and we were going to open and run a practice together. In theory, it was the fairy tale. I caved in because I felt like he knew better than I did. He was 5 years older than me, and he had a plan.
Cy chooses a podiatry school in Des Moines, Iowa, and Amanda gets accepted into a nearby nursing school.
When they moved to Iowa, they were about 10 hours closer to Michigan, I think, so I could see them more often. I would take the train over. help her decorate. And I love doing it. As a father, it was great for me to be able to do that.
But Amanda doesn't adapt well to her new field of study.
Well, I was in a clinical setting one day, and I ended up passing out. And that's when my professor pulled me to the side and said, you know, you may want to rethink your career choice.
She said, Dad, I really want to do it. But she knew that she couldn't do it because she couldn't stay on the side of blood, so.
Amanda decides to withdraw from the program.
When I told Cy, he didn't react well. He made it very clear that he was embarrassed by my decision. He told me he was very disappointed and that I needed to do it. I stood my ground, that I wanted to do something else. And ultimately, he had called me white trash and bitch and wished that I was dead. That's when I realized that I had made a mistake.
When Amanda Ghosh quits nursing school, her husband Cy becomes verbally abusive.
But I'm a loyal soul. I'm very loyal to my mate. And I chose to stay. I didn't think that there wasn't anything that we couldn't fix. I took my vows, my marriage vows, very seriously.
Amanda forges ahead despite Cy's disapproval.
I took all of my criminal justice and nursing courses and wrapped it into a general studies degree, basically the highest level associate degree you can get from a junior college, and I moved on. But I didn't feel proud of that accomplishment. Actually, Cy belittled me because it wasn't good enough, and so I felt like a failure.
And I felt that there was things going on that I didn't know about, which relayed into their marriage some friction.
He definitely made me feel devalued. I felt alone. I felt isolated. I missed my family.
And then, a call from out of the blue brings family directly into Amanda's life in an unexpected way.
Amber was my half-sister. She was born to my dad and my stepmom, Joyce. She was 4 years younger than me, almost to the day. The only sister I've ever had. And as she got older, she became dependent on drugs. We went our separate ways.
While struggling with addiction, 21-year-old Amber gives birth to a baby girl, Kelsey. When Kelsey is a few months old, Amber is ordered by a Michigan judge to enter rehab for 90 days.
The paternity had not been established on Kelsey. And I received a phone call from CPS asking me if I would be interested in doing a temporary foster placement for my niece. It was a no-brainer for me, but I wanted to make sure it was okay with Cy to bring her into the home, and he agreed.
In January of 2007, Amanda travels to Michigan to get her niece.
When I first saw Kelsey, she was only 11 pounds at 7 months old. I knew instantly that I was never going to give her back.
Amber was not capable of taking care of a child, but Amanda was, so I was happy that Kelsey was in a safe place.
I knew that I was on the path that God had laid out for me. She was a sickly baby due to being born addicted. She cried incessantly. It is very hard to deal with a baby that never stops crying. But somehow you figure out how to deal with it.
Amber didn't finish her rehabilitation, so the court awarded Amanda to keep taking care of Kelsey.
Even though he never said it, I think Cy felt like he had made a mistake. I think he quickly realized that the responsibility of a child was far more than he anticipated. Unfortunately, it wore Cy down over time. I was doing the laundry one day and the baby was crying. I walked around the corner and he was shaking her violently. I was shocked. I couldn't believe that he was doing what he was doing to such a tiny, fragile little baby. I was just blown away. And it was in that moment that I knew I had to leave. He has absolutely crossed the line. I need to get her out of there. He didn't deserve the title of being a dad.
In May 2007, Amanda moves back to Houston with Kelsey, leaving Cy behind in Iowa.
I was gonna take care of this baby. That was my mission. Why the career choices that I had made and why it didn't pan out. I knew that I was supposed to be Kelsey's mom. I was able to find a townhouse apartment right next door to my mom, which was extremely helpful because she was able to help me with the baby. I got a part-time job so that we could survive. Somehow we made it work. All of a sudden I became a single mom. We were divorced in December of 2008. He filed for divorce and it was uncontested. It was easy, 2-page divorce. I felt like it was the worst thing that had ever happened to me, but probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me at the same time. It was such a weird feeling.
Amanda enrolls in a sonography program for training in ultrasound.
I felt very confident. I found my independence. I was going to school and I was working full-time. Kelsey was going to daycare and thriving in daycare. We were happy. I was free of all of the dysfunction that I had lived in for so long.
But Amanda's newfound peace will not last for long.
So I moved back to Texas in December of 2009, early 2010. And that's when the stalking began.
I can't imagine what that would feel like to be victimized, stalked, harassed, knowing there is a weapon involved. This behavior can't go on forever. When is somebody gonna break?
Amanda Harris has moved on with her life, while Cy flounders.
Ironically enough, he decided that medical school wasn't quite right for him.
Cy drops out of podiatry, converts to Christianity, and returns to Houston.
One day he called me and told me that he had obtained a job at a pizza place near my apartment. And I thought, why in the world would he take a job delivering pizzas? And then it dawned on me that he could drive in and out of my apartment complex on the daily, on the hourly sometimes. I found it to be bizarre behavior.
He's a pizza delivery driver. Where being a law enforcement officer wasn't good enough for her, now he's going to drive and deliver pizzas, not because he wants to, but because it allows him to have the freedom to drive by and check on her whenever he wants to.
In early 2011, 2.5 years after her divorce, Amanda moves to a new home in a new neighborhood and doesn't share her address with Cy. It's a new beginning.
I was encouraged by my friends to get out there, so I put my profile up on an online dating site and I met Wayne.
Wayne Harris works in the motorsports industry and, like Amanda, is divorced with one child, a boy named Nick.
So I met up with him and he thought he was an attractive man and our conversations just flowed so well. I just knew right away. I was so ecstatic to feel this feeling again, to know that I was capable of feeling, the joy, the butterflies again. And he was as well, that we just didn't miss a beat. We decided that we were gonna see each other the very next day, which turned into the very next day and every day thereafter, unless he was out of town for work.
And I thought he's just a fantastic guy. Real nice to be around, very energetic.
So Super Bowl Sunday rolled around and Wayne came over that evening and I was cooking. And I would oftentimes let Kelsey play at the park right there because I could see her. She's basically within arm's reach of me. So Kelsey's playing, Wayne and I are talking, and I get a knock at the door, and it's the police officer that lives on site. He had received a call from a concerned person letting them know that I let my child play outside unattended.
Amanda invites the officer inside to discuss it, embarrassed that her new boyfriend is a witness.
We all had conversation. Wayne had conversation with him. We were all in agreement that she was certainly within an eye shot, ear shot, arm shot of me and that she was perfectly fine. I asked the officer who had made the call, and he couldn't tell me, but I knew in my gut who was at the root of this. I felt frustrated. I felt violated again. It's a very uneasy feeling to know you're being watched. At this point, my relationship is blossoming with Wayne, and I didn't let him know everything that was going on because I certainly didn't want to taint a good relationship with my baggage and drama. I didn't want to bring that into the relationship.
Amanda's strategy is to block Cy completely.
I figured he didn't get his way. Hopefully he'll move on now, but that never happened. And he knew exactly what button to push, which was going after my daughter.
It has been 5 years since Amanda took custody of Kelsey. Now, as Amanda is on the verge of becoming Kelsey's legal mother, Cy starts to stir things up.
What he did is he cleverly went to a therapist, told the therapist all of his grievance toward me, and made me out to look like a neglectful mother. And it was her duty to call CPS by state law. I received a phone call from CPS that they were going to interview my daughter that day. I felt mortified, and as soon as she stepped foot in my door, she realized quickly that Kelsey was just fine.
I just couldn't believe that he did that. It was like, when does it stop?
Kelsey, the adopted daughter, is the reason she left him in the first place. So by calling CPS, if that worker had not done a thorough and proper investigation or had just rushed to judgment, then Amanda could have very easily lost Kelsey. And for all intents and purposes, her niece, who is now her daughter, is the most important thing she has. And it would have been devastating.
Concerned that Cy's unpredictable behavior is escalating, Amanda seeks help from the local police.
I don't think it's ever going to go away, and I honestly have no idea how to deal with it. I've gone to the police department at this point. I've talked to officers that have asked me to just ignore it, and as long as he doesn't put his hands on me, there's really nothing they can do. It's very frustrating. I felt horribly harassed, unprotected, and you feel so helpless.
Wayne steps up and asks Amanda and Kelsey to move in with him on the other side of Houston.
It was the best feeling. I felt Kelsey was going to have a great role model, a great father figure. Moving to the north side of town was good because I didn't know where I had gone. And so the stalking had come to a halt for a short period of time. Life was actually going really, really well.
It was very, very comforting to know that she was with somebody that was safe, and Kelsey too.
That all changes one night when Wayne is away on business.
I woke up to gunshots outside of my bedroom window. I knew he was out there.
In 2012, in the Houston suburb of Tomball, Amanda Ghosh is awakened by gunshots outside her window.
I immediately called the police.
She did not see Cy shoot the gun, but she did see him get in the car. When that happened, well, that's when I really became concerned.
When they showed up, he wasn't there. They checked the perimeter of the home. They didn't find any shell casings. They spoke with the neighbors. None of the neighbors had heard any gunshots, and so I kind of felt like they didn't believe me, and it really went nowhere.
Amanda is on high alert, and it's not long before another incident occurs.
One night, Wayne and I were sitting in the living room watching TV, and our dog ran to the window and was barking his tail off. So I knew somebody was out there, and I had a feeling that it was Cy. Wayne hopped up quite angrily, and I encouraged him to just settle down for half a second, let me call the police and get them there this time so that they could witness what was going on. They were right around the corner, so it only took a couple of minutes, and they caught him there. Thank God. This time he had finally been caught, and they issued him a trespass violation and a warning. We actually felt good after that for a while. We didn't see him for quite some time after that.
With Cy in her rear view, Amanda commits to her bright future.
We decided to get married on 12/12/12 at 12/12 at the Justice of the Peace.
They were very, very happy. And in fact, at the time that they got married, they adopted Kelsey at the same time.
I had been fighting for custody of Kelsey for the better part of 7 years. It was quite the process, but we'd finally gotten there. And then 2 days later, I found out I was pregnant for Gemma.
It was great to see. Wayne wrote notes for the unborn baby for her to read later on and, when she grows up. So he was very, very excited about being a new father.
Gemma was born with a very, very rare condition called bacterial association. She was born with only one kidney, as well as no esophagus, a cardiac defect, and a vertebral defect. Needless to say, she required 24/7 attention, care.
She was a perfect little child. Of course, all of my grandkids were perfect. They are a blessing.
About a year and a half after Gemma was born, we moved into this beautiful home that neither one of us thought we would ever be able to live in. And here we achieved it. We were on top of the world at this point. Christmas Day 2015, we woke up rather early with the kiddos because they were just super excited. And we just sat down to open our gifts, and I hear a tap at the door. And who else but Cy?
Cy tells Amanda that he would like to pray with her and her 2 daughters.
I just couldn't believe that he even came back around, especially at a time when the family's getting together for Christmas.
Wayne came unglued that day. He escorted Cy off of our property with a lot of profanity and a lot of anger and aggression.
Cy's stalking has been going on for almost 6 years, ever since Amanda decided to leave him.
There are some individuals who cannot take no for an answer. They cannot move on and regain their sense of balance until they're back in control again. Maybe if Amanda were to run back to him and he could say, "No, I don't want you," then he would have control again and he could move on. Right now, none of the decisions are his, except the ones that he uses to torture and drive them crazy.
She is aware of Texas's strong stand your ground laws and asks the police for more information about self-defense.
So I asked the officer what my rights were. If I had the right to hold him at citizen's arrest until the police got there. He told me that we definitely had that right.
Wayne owns a gun and suggests Amanda buy one too.
Wayne encouraged me to go get my license to carry and buy a weapon to protect myself due to all of this incessant harassment, stalking. So I took a few classes and tried to become as capable with my weapon as possible. June 28th, 2017 was Kelsey's 11th birthday, and she chose to just have a she day. She chose to do all kinds of things like get her nails done, get her hair done, very girly stuff.
Amanda, Kelsey, and Kelsey's friend Georgia meet up with Wayne, his son Nick, and baby Gemma at Kelsey's favorite restaurant.
And after dinner, Gemma was exhausted, so I asked Wayne to take her back home so that I could finish shopping with Kelsey and her friend for her birthday. So he obliged and reached over and gave me a kiss, a really long kiss. The kids were in the background ewing. I'll forever remember it. I stayed at the mall with Georgia and Kelsey for probably about another hour. Kelsey asked me if her friend could stay the night, and I said sure. So all three of us went back to our home. And as I was rounding the corner of my street, I saw Cy on his hands and knees at my front door with Wayne pointing a gun at him. I knew immediately that I needed to protect my family. I reached into my glove box, I grabbed my gun, and I told the girls to sit down and not to move. I got out of the car, I held the gun in that direction, and I called the police.
Hi, I need a police officer as soon as possible. I'm making
Hold on.
a arrest right now.
You can't make a citizen's arrest.
Yes, I've already been informed that I can. I have an ongoing case against this person.
Ma'am.
Get down! Get down!
Who is this man to you?
He is my ex-husband.
On June 28, 2017, Jennifer Provoznik is visiting friends who live down the street from where Amanda and Wayne live.
I work in law enforcement, and it's my day off, so I just wanted to really enjoy my day with my friends.
They are oblivious to the scene unfolding a couple of yards away.
My name is Amanda Harris. I've been down there many times to tell you guys what's going on. He's been told by the police to stay away many, hundreds of times.
Do you have a weapon right now?
My husband and I both have a weapon.
Okay, I'm going to need you to put that weapon up, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, you and your husband both.
Wayne, he wants you to put your weapon down.
Does this other male have a weapon?
I have no idea.
From inside the car, 11-year-old Kelsey also calls 911.
Send him over right now, please.
What's going on?
My mom's ex-husband, he literally stalks us and he's at our house right now. My parents are yelling at him right now. It's done. I'm sorry. I'm just really scared.
Sorry, I'm getting out of you. Stay
Oh my God.
And I hear 3 distinct gunshots and a woman screaming. So at this time, my training kicks in, and I told my friend, I was like, listen, call 911. I'm going down there.
I had been shot, but I didn't know it. It was all so surreal. I saw my husband fall to the ground out of the corner of my eye. And as I sat up from the position I was in, I was shot again. And I was laying between the 2 cars when I saw Sai's feet moving around the car and circle back to me. And when I looked up, he was holding a gun at my head, and he pulled the trigger. But it didn't fire. I had been saved by the grace of God. It didn't fire. And some divine force picked me up, and I got to my feet and I ran for my life.
I see a woman running into the house and slamming the door. And then there's this guy just standing there in between 2 cars, looking around. And he looks right at me and then takes off running.
Sai Ghosh gets in a car and flees the scene.
And that's when a little girl gets out of the car. She looks at me and she starts screaming, "Save my daddy." And I look down, there's a body in the driveway. And I was like, listen, I said, there's a woman behind me. You take your friend. You do not stop till you get to her. Do you understand me? And she goes, yes. And so I sent her off at that point. I look at the individual on the ground, and I knew there was no point of me even attempting CPR or any other life-saving matters.
All I could think is he's gonna fire through this door. And I realized in that moment that I had left Kelsey in the back seat of the car. I ran back out the front door, and I was met by a very kind lady.
I know that she's wounded and she's also in shock. She's yelling about her babies being missing. She's also screaming, I knew he would do something like this. I knew it. And then she notices the man in the driveway.
She kindly grabbed me by my arm. And that's when I realized I'd been shot in my arm. And she walked me over to his body. And I was able to say goodbye to my husband. And they were putting me in an ambulance shortly thereafter.
When police arrive, they find 5-year-old Gemma and 17-year-old Nick hiding in a closet. That's when Amanda's father drops by on his way home to say happy birthday to Kelsey.
As I got out of the car, there was 3 or 4 policemen that came up to me. And the first thing they said was, Amanda's in the hospital, but she's okay. She's been shot, but she's going to be okay. And right at that point, that's when my heart just fell. And the first thing I thought of was the kids. Are the kids okay? What happened? And they said, yeah, the kids are here. They're with some of the neighbors that are here. And then I said, well, what about Wayne? That's when they continued to tell me he didn't make it.
We begin with that breaking news alert out of League City. A man police initially wanted for questioning is now wanted for murder.
We were the first news crew on the scene. We're getting there, and it's the chaos of the scene because you have a gunman on the run, you have dead body and someone seriously wounded, and everyone's trying to figure out what happened.
They put the hospital on lockdown because Cy was on the run.
I was at her bedside the whole time. I don't know, it's like a movie, a bad movie. It was a horrible nightmare.
So as this statewide manhunt is going on, police had reason to believe that Cy was going to try to run for the border. And it was a checkpoint in El Paso. They were able to identify that Cy was trying to cross. There wasn't much of a resistance. At that point, even Cy had figured out that this was over and he was going to be taken into custody. When they look inside the vehicle, they do find a gun. They find several clips with bullets inside where the casings match the 12 that were found on scene of the shooting back in Lake City.
I don't know how I made it through. I really don't. But I have children, and they needed me, and life didn't stop. I had to get out of bed every day. I had to accept that he was never coming back. Thank God for my children. I stayed in the house until the trial came, and it took us 2 years to go to trial.
As the family tries to heal, Amanda assumes the only time she will ever have to encounter Cy again is in court. But she is wrong.
Well, one day I get this phone call, and I can clearly see that it's the jail on my caller ID. So I turn on the voice recorder, and I took the phone call.
Hello?
Hello?
I just want to apologize to you. I'm sorry for everything, Amanda. I'm really sorry.
Is this a joke?
No, I just want to apologize.
You almost killed me. Is this a joke?
No, Amanda, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I got scared. I
Got scared?
I could not believe that I was listening to this person on the other end of the phone. How is this even allowed? Who is running this jail and allowing a murderer to call his victim?
I just want to pray with you guys. I'll put you on the phone real quick before we go to trial. Can I pray with you? Please, Jesus, please comfort Amanda. Please help me never harm her, never to cause her problems again.
Cy's staggering ability to keep harassing Amanda will even continue through the trial itself.
So I was charged with murder in the first degree, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and stalking.
In the middle of the case, Cy fires his defense attorney and decides he's going to defend himself now.
But I know that he wanted to get me on the stand and question me, and that was his way of doing it. He was able to question me for a very long period of time.
Cy thought that Amanda was going to wilt on the stand. That's not what happened.
Amanda comes through this a hero. The fact that she does not cave, that she looks him straight in the eye and answers his questions. So if he wanted control, he didn't get it. He got to talk to her, but he didn't get the responses, the feeling, the control that he was seeking. So in that case, Amanda comes out a winner.
I don't know how the law allows your attacker to question you. How is that even possible? But it happened.
After the trial wraps up, the jury is quick to return guilty verdicts. And on March 5th, 2020, Cy is sentenced to 50 years in prison. He will be eligible for parole after serving 25 years.
I was disappointed because I feel like he should have gotten life without the possibility of parole. I truly believe that if he were to walk the streets again, if he were to ever get out, that he will kill me. He will finish the job.
I hope he never gets out, and all I can do is just say, let Jesus take the wheel. Even though I'm that close to her, I can't imagine going through what she went through. But we get through it every day. It's a process where we're all working through it.
I was angry with the police. I feel like they failed my family, and I think Cy Ghosh is pure evil. But there's still a big life to live, and I choose to just be happy. We have what, 40? I have 40 summers left. I'm gonna make the best of the 40 summers I have left. Wayne wouldn't want me to waste them.
The vast, unforgiving expanse of the Pacific Ocean isolates the American territory of Samoa, wrapping it in a profound and uninterrupted geographical silence. Far removed from the chaotic sprawl of mainland metropolises, this collection of islands operates on a completely different rhythm, dictated by the tide, the sun, and a deeply ingrained cultural tranquility. For over half a century, this isolation has served not as a cage, but as an impenetrable shield against the virulent strains of violent crime that plague the rest of the modern world. Here, history has moved slowly, peacefully, and predictably. The concept of sudden, orchestrated brutality is so foreign that it exists only as a distant rumor, something that happens on television screens or in faraway cities, never under the heavy, humid canopy of their own tropical sky. July 22, 2010, begins with the exact same suffocating, predictable humidity that characterizes almost every summer morning in the region. The air is thick, saturated with moisture, pressing down on the administrative center of Pago Pago with a physical weight. It is the kind of heat that slows movement, that encourages a measured, unhurried pace of life. The sky stretches above the island in a brilliant, piercing blue, contrasting sharply with the deep, verdant greens of the tropical foliage that crawls up the volcanic slopes. The sounds of the morning are rhythmic and entirely benign. The distant, continuous murmur of the Pacific waves breaking against the shoreline provides a steady baseline, punctuated only by the occasional cry of seagulls circling overhead and the sparse, lazy hum of minimal morning traffic navigating the roads outside the main governmental plaza. It is a portrait of absolute, unshakable serenity. There is no tension in the air, no electric hum of impending danger, no subtle shift in the atmosphere to warn of the cataclysm that is about to fracture the history of the island forever. In the heart of this serene landscape stands the government building, the epicenter of administrative and legal authority in Pago Pago. Yet, unlike the fortified, concrete fortresses of law enforcement found in high-crime zones across the globe, this structure is approachable, seamlessly integrated into the laid-back environment. It is a place of bureaucracy and community governance, not a citadel preparing for a siege. The concrete pathways leading to its entrance are wide and open, bathed in the harsh morning sunlight. It is upon this very concrete that Major Lucilla Brown, a high-ranking and respected officer of the Territorial Police Force, steps out into the sweltering heat of the morning alongside two of his colleagues. Their movements are steady, casual, and entirely devoid of urgency. The rhythmic sound of their uniform boots striking the pavement echoes softly in the quiet air, a sound of order and routine rather than a march to confrontation. They are men on duty, engaged in the mundane administrative responsibilities that make up the bulk of police work in a territory where serious violent offenses are a statistical anomaly. The way they carry themselves is a direct reflection of the society they protect. In a major metropolitan city, police officers exiting a high-profile building operate with a baseline level of tactical awareness. Their eyes scan rooftops, monitor the tree lines, and assess every approaching vehicle or pedestrian. Their posture is rigid, an unconscious preparation for conflict. But here, in the heart of Pago Pago, such a mindset is unnecessary. It has been rendered obsolete by decades of peace. Because of this profound historical safety, the officers walking across the sunlit concrete are utterly exposed. They wear standard uniforms, the fabric clinging to their skin in the oppressive morning humidity. They do not wear heavy, reinforced Kevlar vests. The concept of walking out the front door of their own headquarters encased in high-grade body armor would seem not only uncomfortable in the tropical heat, but fundamentally absurd, a paranoid overreaction to a threat that simply does not exist in their reality. The weapons strapped to their duty belts, standard issue sidearms, are worn more as symbols of their authority and the rule of law than as vital instruments of daily survival. In American Samoa, a police badge commands respect. A firearm is rarely, if ever, drawn in anger. The guns rest in their holsters, cold and unused, serving merely to complete the uniform of men who have every reason to believe they will return home to their families at the end of their shift without ever having to unfasten the safety catches. As Major Brown and his two fellow officers walk, the conversation between them, the slight shifts in their weight, the way they look out toward the horizon rather than into the shadows, paints a devastating picture of vulnerability. They are trapped in a false sense of absolute security, a security validated by 50 years of evidence. They have no psychological armor to match their lack of physical armor. Their minds are occupied with the tasks of the day, with the heat, with the routine of their profession. They cannot fathom that the environment they have sworn to protect, the very landscape they know intimately, has suddenly and silently turned hostile. They are walking on a stage, perfectly illuminated by the morning sun, entirely unaware that the narrative of their lives has already been rewritten by an unseen author lurking just yards away. Directly across from the open, sun-drenched expanse of the plaza, the landscape shifts into the dense, tangled shadows of tropical vegetation. The lush bushes and broad-leafed plants that beautify the perimeter of the administrative zone provide a deep, natural curtain of darkness, a stark contrast to the glaring light reflecting off the government building. It is within this dense foliage, perfectly concealed from the casual glances of the officers, that the unthinkable has taken shape. The island's unbroken streak of peace is about to be shattered not by an invading force or a natural disaster, but by a solitary figure waiting in the suffocating heat of the bushes. Siamo Jr. is positioned in the shadows, perfectly still, his presence completely masked by the rustling leaves and the ambient noise of the ocean. He is entirely disconnected from the beautiful morning unfolding around him. His attention is hyper-focused, funneled down into a singular, obsessive purpose. Through the gaps in the green leaves, his eyes are locked onto the three officers with a chilling, predatory intensity. There is no hesitation in his gaze, no frantic shifting of focus, no outward manifestation of panic or second thoughts. It is a look of absolute, terrifying coldness, a localized manifestation of pure, unadulterated malice introduced into an environment that has no antibodies to fight it. He watches Major Brown's every step, tracks the relaxed sway of the officer's arms, and calculates the rapidly decreasing distance between them and the edge of the vegetation. The contrast between the two sides of the plaza is apocalyptic. On the bright, sunlit concrete, three men walk in a state of relaxed camaraderie, embodying the law, order, and peaceful history of the territory. In the dark, humid underbrush, a solitary consciousness operates on a frequency of pure violence, preparing to introduce a level of brutality that Pago Pago has never witnessed. What makes the impending moment so unimaginably horrific is the total absence of warning. There is no preceding argument, no escalating tension in the streets, no shouted threats echoing across the asphalt, no frantic calls over the police radio warning of an armed suspect in the vicinity. The transition from paradise to a war zone will not be gradual, it will be instantaneous, a violent severing of the timeline. In his hands, resting in the shadows, Siamo Jr. holds a heavy, military-grade firearm. This is not a standard civilian weapon. It is an instrument engineered specifically for maximum lethality and rapid destruction. The very presence of such a weapon on this quiet island is an anomaly, a mechanical interloper in a natural paradise. The cold steel of the barrel absorbs the heat of the morning, heavy with the devastating potential of the ammunition loaded within. The weapon represents a terrifying escalation of force, an overwhelming tactical advantage brought against men who are armed only with complacency and standard-issue sidearms they have never needed to use in combat. The heavy firearm requires both hands to stabilize, its brutal design speaking to an intent that goes far beyond a simple confrontation. This is an ambush designed for total annihilation. The seconds stretch and distort in the heavy air. The seagulls continue to cry in the distance. The waves continue to crash relentlessly against the shores of the island, keeping the ancient rhythm of the Pacific. Major Lysla Brown takes another step forward, his boots scuffing slightly against the concrete, the sound entirely swallowed by the vastness of the morning. He looks ahead, perhaps toward a parked vehicle, perhaps toward the street, his mind navigating the ordinary details of a Tuesday morning. He is a man at the pinnacle of his career, moving confidently through the community he serves, entirely oblivious to the fact that he has walked directly into the crosshairs of an executioner. In the bushes, the predatory stillness reaches its peak. The target is acquired. The distance is perfect. The victims are grouped closely together, devoid of cover, devoid of suspicion, and devoid of heavy armor. The trap has been set with terrifying patience, and the prey has wandered exactly into the designated kill zone. The island of American Samoa rests for one final fraction of a second in its historic, half-century state of innocence. The tropical sun beats down on the concrete, illuminating the final steps of Major Brown. The suffocating humidity hangs in the air, thick and heavy, waiting to be violently displaced. The eyes in the shadows do not blink. The grip on the heavy, military-grade weapon tightens, the finger moving deliberately toward the trigger mechanism, ready to unleash a storm of fire and lead that will tear the sky apart, permanently stain the grounds of the government building, and drag the peaceful territory into a dark, unprecedented nightmare of bloodshed and legal chaos. The transition from tranquility to catastrophic violence does not occur over minutes or seconds. It is initiated in a fraction of a millisecond by a sound that does not belong in the island's natural ecosystem. It is the sharp, distinct, metallic clack of a bolt being racked back on a heavy, military-grade firearm. In the humid air of Pago Pago, where the acoustic environment is dominated by the Pacific Ocean and rustling palm fronds, this mechanical noise is an alien intrusion. It slices through the morning ambience with surgical precision, a concentrated signal of impending doom that the human brain struggles to immediately categorize. The vibrant tropical colors, the piercing blue sky, the emerald green vegetation, the warm gold sun reflecting off the concrete, seem to drain away in an instant. For anyone close enough to comprehend what that metallic sound represents, the psychological reality of the plaza violently shifts. The visual spectrum collapses into a cold, desolate wash of ashen gray. The tropical heat is suddenly replaced by a chilling dread. Time stretches, distorting the reality of the officers walking in front of the building. Their relaxed strides are caught in a cruel suspension, completely disconnected from the lethal momentum set into motion inside the shadowed underbrush. They are suspended in the final breath of the island's innocence, unaware that the heavy steel mechanism has chambered a round meant for them. From the dense shadows of the tropical foliage, the manifestation of this threat steps out onto the sunlit concrete. Siamo Jr. does not rush. He does not sprint wildly into the open, nor does he exhibit the frantic energy of a spontaneous confrontation. He emerges with a terrifying, calculated deliberation, stepping over the threshold separating the hidden darkness of the bushes from the exposed public stage of the administrative center. The contrast is jarring. In his hands, he carries a heavy military-grade weapon, an instrument of mass devastation that looks entirely out of place against the backdrop of the peaceful government building. What makes his sudden appearance deeply horrifying is the absolute absence of human communication. He does not shout a warning. He does not scream a manifesto or a grievance. There is no challenge issued into the morning air, no opportunity for negotiation, and no chance for the officers to understand why they are being targeted. In typical violent encounters, there is almost always a preamble, an escalation of voices, or a visible display of aggression, allowing the human mind to trigger a biological fight-or-flight response. Here, There is nothing but an eerie silence surrounding the shooter. He denies his victims the basic dignity of knowing they are under attack before the violence begins. He is a silent executioner, moving through the suffocating humidity with a cold, predatory focus that strips the impending act of emotion, reducing it to a mechanical process of destruction. The geographical reality of the ambush leaves no margin for survival. The distance between the edge of the vegetation and the officers is devastatingly short, a matter of mere yards rendering any attempt at evasion mathematically impossible. It is point-blank range for a weapon designed to hit targets at hundreds of meters. At this extreme proximity, missing is eliminated. Every trigger pull guarantees catastrophic trauma. Without breaking his emotionless stride, Siamo raises the heavy barrel, aligning the iron sights with the dark uniforms of the police officers who are still casually walking across the plaza. The final fraction of a second of peace is obliterated by a blinding, jagged flash of incandescent fire erupting from the muzzle. It is an unnatural lightning strike in the middle of a clear morning. The visual burst of the gunshot is instantly followed by the concussive shockwave of the detonation. It is a physical force, a violent displacement of the heavy tropical air slamming into the eardrums of everyone in the vicinity. The first shot tears the fabric of reality apart, but it is merely the opening note of a sustained, deafening roar. The weapon operates on a cyclic rate designed for military suppression, and subsequent detonations blur into a continuous, ear-shattering cacophony. The air transforms into a chaotic vortex of exploding gunpowder, superheated gas, and flying lead. The ambush's lethal physics dictate that the primary target absorbs the maximum force of the initial assault. Major Lisla Brown, walking at the forefront of his colleagues, is caught completely unprotected in the center of the kill zone. The heavy-caliber ammunition, traveling at supersonic speeds, crosses the impossibly short distance in a microsecond, slamming directly into his body before the sound of the first gunshot can fully register in his brain. The impact is devastating, abrupt, and entirely unsurvivable. There is no cinematic final stand, no opportunity to reach for his sidearm, no chance to shout a warning to the men walking beside him. The sheer kinetic energy of the incoming rounds fundamentally destroys his physical structure. He is struck by multiple point-blank impacts that instantly arrest his forward momentum and drop him to the hard concrete of the plaza. He falls exactly where he was walking, collapsing under a merciless storm of lead. Behind him, the bullets passing through the space he occupied slam violently into the facade of the government building. The brutal force of the military ammunition gouges deep craters into the walls, sending sharp fragments of concrete exploding outward. Large panes of architectural glass shatter under the concussive waves, raining jagged, crystalline shards onto the pavement. The beautiful administrative center is instantly disfigured, scarred by craters and violently splashed with the crimson of human blood. For the two officers alongside Major Brown, the situation is a nightmare of biological limitations. The human nervous system requires time to perceive a sudden visual and auditory stimulus, process it as a lethal threat, formulate a physical response, and transmit commands to the muscles. Against the cyclic fire rate of a military-grade weapon at point-blank range, that reaction time is a luxury they simply do not possess. As the deafening roar of the first shots echoes off the concrete and Major Brown violently collapses to the ground, the remaining two officers are thrust into a state of profound shock. Their hands instinctively twitch, moving frantically toward the heavy-duty belts at their waists, desperately trying to unfasten the safety straps and draw the standard-issue sidearms that have never once been fired in anger. It is an ingrained reflex, trying to overcome the paralyzing surprise of a totally unprovoked ambush. But their movements are agonizingly slow compared to the mechanical speed of the assault rifle. Before their fingers can fully wrap around the grips of their holsters, Siamo violently sweeps the muzzle of the heavy weapon across the concrete expanse. The continuous flashes of fire track horizontally with terrifying accuracy. A relentless rain of lead sweeps directly through their airspace, catching them mid-motion. The heavy projectiles tear through their unarmored uniforms, striking them with catastrophic force, instantly neutralizing any defensive response and dropping them onto the blood-soaked pavement. The environment around the government building is instantly plunged into sensory overload and profound auditory distortion. The sheer volume of the military weapon discharging continuously at such a close range creates a localized sonic environment that is deeply traumatizing. The rapid, concussive blasts are so physically overpowering that they effectively drown out all other frequencies of human existence in the plaza. The desperate, involuntary screams of pure terror that erupt from the throats of the civilian bystanders and government employees suddenly trapped in the crossfire are entirely swallowed by the deafening roar of the gunfire. People fall to the ground, covering their heads, opening their mouths to scream for help, but no sound seems to escape. The auditory reality of the moment is dominated entirely by the violence of the machine. The tranquil breeze blowing off the Pacific Ocean, which just moments ago carried the scent of salt water, is violently displaced by the harsh, acrid stench of burning sulfur, vaporized lead, and expelled gunpowder. A thin veil of gray smoke hangs low over the sunlit concrete, drifting lazily through the humid air, creating a ghostly haze that further distorts the horrifying scene on the ground. The physical environment itself seems traumatized, the air ringing with violent echoes bouncing off the surrounding architecture and rolling out over the previously quiet streets. The storm of violence ends as abruptly as it began. The heavy, rhythmic hammering of the weapon suddenly ceases, replaced by the hollow click of an emptied magazine. In mere seconds, a catastrophic amount of ammunition has been violently expelled into the morning air. Siamo Jr. does not attempt to reload. He neither drops the heavy weapon nor rushes to inspect the devastating results of his ambush. His movements remain disturbingly calm and devoid of frantic panic. Having exhausted his supply of lethal force, he simply lowers the smoking barrel, leaving the empty chamber exposed to the humid tropical air. He turns his back on the horrific carnage he has just created. With the same slow, chillingly casual pace that he used to emerge from the vegetation, he begins to walk away from the plaza. He does not run. He simply strides into the heavy morning heat, a solitary figure retreating from the epicenter of absolute destruction. Behind him, the concrete expanse is unrecognizable. The clean pathway is a horrific tableau of shattered glass, pulverized stone, and expanding pools of dark blood. Three figures, men who just moments ago represented the unshakable safety of the territory, lie motionless and catastrophically wounded. The echoes of the gunfire fade over the ocean, leaving a profound, ringing silence infinitely heavier than the peaceful quiet of the morning. In those uninterrupted seconds of unadulterated violence, the fundamental reality of American Samoa has been permanently fractured. The heavy silence that descends upon the plaza in the immediate wake of the gunfire is infinitely more terrifying than the deafening roar of the weapon itself. It is a profound, unnatural stillness, a vacuum created by the sudden exhaustion of catastrophic violence. The thick, humid air of the tropical morning, which just moments ago carried the gentle rhythm of the Pacific Ocean, is now completely stagnant, choked with the acrid, metallic stench of vaporized lead, burnt powder, and the unmistakable, heavy scent of human blood. The thin veil of gray smoke expelled from the muzzle of the military-grade weapon hangs low over the sun-drenched concrete, drifting lazily and aimlessly, creating a ghostly shroud over the epicenter of the massacre. Beneath this dissipating haze, the reality of the devastation begins to solidify. The pristine walkway leading to the government building, a symbol of order and bureaucracy, has been violently transformed into a chaotic landscape of destruction. Jagged fragments of shattered architectural glass sparkle cruelly in the morning sunlight, resting among pulverized chunks of concrete violently gouged from the walls by stray supersonic projectiles. In the center of this horrific tableau lie the three figures who, only seconds prior, represented the unshakable safety of the territory. Their dark uniforms, meant to symbolize authority and peace, are now tragically compromised, soaked in an expanding tide of dark crimson that flows steadily across the gray pavement, pooling in the shallow depressions of the concrete. For several agonizing seconds, the civilians, Government employees and bystanders caught on the periphery of the plaza remain frozen in a state of absolute physiological paralysis. The human brain, unaccustomed to processing the raw, unfiltered reality of a point-blank mass shooting, completely short-circuits. People are trapped in a surreal, waking nightmare, their eyes wide with uncomprehending horror as they stare at the carnage. They are statues anchored to the ground by a collective, suffocating shock. But this paralysis is fragile, and as the final echo of the gunfire fades into the distant mountains, the dam breaks. The cognitive dissonance shatters, replaced by a primal, overwhelming wave of pure panic. The unnatural silence is violently fractured by a sudden, chaotic eruption of human desperation. It begins with a single, high-pitched scream that tears through the humid air, followed instantly by a cacophony of frantic voices. People drop the files and briefcases they were carrying, their mundane morning routines abandoned as survival instincts take total control. Some instinctively dive toward the ground, pressing their faces into the dirt of the landscaping, terrified that the unseen shooter might return. Others turn and run blindly in the opposite direction, their footsteps pounding erratically against the pavement as they desperately seek the safety of nearby vehicles or the heavy concrete pillars of adjacent structures. The organized, peaceful administrative center dissolves into absolute bedlam. Within moments, the chaotic symphony of civilian panic is pierced by a new, equally urgent sound. The static-filled crackle of police radios erupts across the island, frantic voices desperately calling for backup, for medical assistance, for any available unit to converge on the government building. The dispatchers, stationed in rooms far removed from the blood-soaked plaza, struggle to comprehend the initial reports flooding through their headsets. The concept of an active shooter wielding a heavy military weapon in the heart of Pago Pago is so entirely alien to their protocols that the first transmissions are met with a chilling disbelief. But the sheer volume of the distress calls, the raw terror echoing in the voices of the callers, quickly overrides any skepticism. Across the territory, the wailing, urgent shriek of emergency sirens begins to rise, a sound that cuts through the tranquil island air like a physical blade. Police cruisers and emergency medical vehicles tear out of their stations, their tires screaming against the asphalt as they navigate the coastal roads with reckless, desperate speed. The sirens blend together into a continuous, deafening wail, a horrific overture to the tragedy that is actively unfolding on the plaza. When the first wave of emergency responders violently skids to a halt at the edge of the government building, the officers and paramedics are confronted with a psychological nightmare that no amount of training could have adequately prepared them for. They hurl themselves out of their vehicles, carrying heavy medical bags and clutching their own sidearms, scanning the perimeter for a threat that has already evaporated into the tropical heat. As they rush onto the sunlit concrete, their adrenaline-fueled momentum comes to a crashing, devastating halt. They are not responding to a civilian dispute or a routine emergency. They are staring down at their own brothers in arms. The badges pinned to the chests of the fallen victims reflect the same sunlight as the badges worn by the arriving officers. The realization hits the responding units with the force of a physical blow. The professional detachment required to manage a crime scene instantly dissolves into a deeply personal, agonizing horror. This is not just a crime. It is an attack on their family, a brutal severing of the thin blue line that has held the peaceful territory together for generations. The paramedics, battling through their own shock, drop to their knees on the blood-slicked concrete, immediately initiating frantic triage protocols. Their hands, covered in sterile blue gloves that are instantly stained crimson, move with desperate speed as they assess the catastrophic damage inflicted by the high-velocity ammunition. They converge first on Major Lucilla Brown. He lies at the epicenter of the attack, having absorbed the most direct and devastating force of the initial ambush. The medical personnel tear open his uniform, desperately searching for a pulse, for the rise and fall of his chest, for any faint flicker of biological defiance. But the clinical reality of the wounds is absolute and undeniable. The military-grade projectiles have caused massive, irreparable trauma to his vital organs, fundamentally destroying his body's ability to sustain life. There is no desperate fight to be had, no heroic medical intervention that can reverse the catastrophic physics of the assault. Right there, on the hard, sunlit concrete of the plaza he had sworn to protect, under the vast, uncaring blue sky of the Pacific, Major Lucilla Brown is pronounced dead. He has been systematically executed, his life violently extinguished in a matter of seconds by an act of unprovoked, calculated malice. Leaving the fallen major under the somber guard of weeping police officers, the medical teams violently shift their focus to the two remaining victims. These officers are clinging to existence by the thinnest, most fragile of margins. The scene around them is a chaotic blur of frantic medical intervention. Paramedics shout urgent commands over the wailing sirens, demanding trauma dressings, tourniquets, and intravenous lines. They are fighting a terrifying, high-stakes battle against massive hemorrhage, pressing their physical weight down onto the catastrophic wounds in a desperate attempt to stem the relentless flow of blood. The heavy rifle rounds have shattered bone, severed major arteries, and caused extensive internal trauma that the local medical infrastructure is rarely, if ever, forced to confront. The pavement beneath the medics is entirely painted in blood, making it difficult for them to maintain their footing as they work frantically to stabilize the officers, just enough to survive the transport. Every passing second is a massive victory for the Grim Reaper, and the air is thick with the metallic smell of blood and the suffocating tension of impending death. With desperate, coordinated effort, the two critically wounded officers are hoisted onto reinforced stretchers. Their bodies are secured, surrounded by a chaotic tangle of plastic tubing and blood-soaked gauze. The stretchers are violently shoved into the waiting ambulances, the heavy rear doors slamming shut with a sound of brutal finality. The ambulances tear away from the government plaza, their tires gripping the pavement as they accelerate to dangerous speeds, their sirens screaming a continuous, agonizing plea for the traffic to clear. Inside the cramped, brightly lit compartments of the emergency vehicles, the paramedics continue their frantic, bloody struggle. They're performing advanced trauma life support on a moving platform, fighting to keep the officers' rapidly dropping blood pressure from collapsing entirely. The monitors beep with terrifying, erratic rhythms, a digital representation of the chaos unfolding within the victims' shattered bodies. The ride to the hospital is a blur of flashing red and blue lights, a desperate race against an invisible, ticking clock that threatens to claim 2 more lives before the day is over. As the ambulances vanish down the coastal roads, leaving behind a crime scene that looks like a miniature war zone, a profound and horrifying shockwave begins to radiate outward across the entire territory of American Samoa. The news of the massacre does not spread slowly. It detonates across the island like a psychological bomb. In homes, in local businesses, in schools, and in the bustling harbor, the rhythmic, peaceful flow of daily life comes to a sudden, jarring halt. People freeze as they hear the frantic radio broadcasts, as their phones begin to ring relentlessly with panicked calls from relatives and friends. The information is almost impossible to process. The concept of an armed ambush, of a military-style execution in the heart of their administrative center, contradicts everything they know about their home. For decades, the island has defined itself by its safety, by its strong community bonds, and by its immunity to the rampant, senseless violence that dominates the international news cycle. That fundamental truth, the core of their territorial identity, has just been violently ripped away. The realization that this was not a random act of chaotic violence, but a targeted, calculated execution of the territory's law enforcement, adds a deeply sinister layer to the collective trauma. The people of Pago Pago are not just mourning the tragic loss of a respected figure, they are confronting the terrifying reality that the absolute symbol of their safety and justice has been publicly slaughtered with complete impunity. Major Lucilla Brown was a pillar of the community, a man who represented the stability and order of the islands. To have him gunned down in broad daylight, right in front of the seat of government, is a message written in blood that no one on the island is truly safe. The beautiful tropical environment, the pristine beaches, and the lush volcanic slopes suddenly feel intensely claustrophobic. The island has lost its innocence. The invisible, impenetrable shield that had protected American Samoa for over half a century has been shattered by a barrage of heavy-caliber ammunition. As the sun continues to climb higher into the vibrant blue sky, relentlessly illuminating the bloodstains permanently etched into the concrete plaza, the territory is forced to confront a dark, unprecedented reality. They have crossed a threshold of violence from which they can never return, entering a terrifying new era where the fundamental concepts of safety, justice, and the sanctity of life will have to be violently and painfully redefined in the shadow of an unimaginable tragedy. The immediate aftermath of the violence forces a radical and traumatizing shift in the fundamental duties of the local law enforcement agencies. The administrative center of Pago Pago, normally the beating heart of the territory's bureaucratic and civil life, is instantly reclassified as the most significant and horrifying crime scene in the modern history of American Samoa. The transition is brutal. The officers who were rushing to the plaza moments earlier with the desperate hope of neutralizing an active threat and saving their colleagues must now forcefully suppress their own overwhelming grief. They must pivot from being desperate rescuers to meticulous, objective investigators standing in the very epicenter of their own collective nightmare. The psychological toll of this sudden shift is almost impossible to quantify. These men and women are not anonymous federal agents parachuting into a foreign jurisdiction to examine a sterile scene. They are local officers, tightly bound by the unique, familial ties of island life. They are standing over the blood of their commanding officer, Major Lucilla Brown, forced to analyze the mechanics of his slaughter with scientific detachment. The logistical lockdown of the territory happens with unprecedented speed, driven by the sheer geographical reality of American Samoa. Unlike a manhunt in a sprawling continental metropolis, where a perpetrator can slip across county lines or vanish onto an interstate highway system within minutes, this island is a closed environment. The vast, deep blue expanse of the Pacific Ocean acts as an impenetrable, natural prison wall. There are only a finite number of roads, a single airport, and a limited number of deep-water harbors. Recognizing that the suspect cannot easily flee the territory, the investigative strategy instantly focuses on locking down these critical transit points. Every available officer is recalled to active duty, stripping off their standard patrol uniforms and donning the heavy, uncomfortable tactical gear that has gathered dust in the armory for years. The peaceful roads of the island are abruptly severed by hastily assembled roadblocks. Officers stand behind the hoods of their cruisers, gripping their service weapons with white-knuckled tension, stopping every single vehicle and scrutinizing every face. The tropical paradise has been transformed into an active tactical grid, humming with a dark, terrifying energy as the hunt for a mass murderer begins. Back at the plaza, the forensic processing of the crime scene unfolds with an agonizing, meticulous slowness. The glaring tropical sun, climbing higher into the cloudless sky, cruelly illuminates every horrific detail of the violence. Yellow crime scene tape is stretched tightly around the perimeter of the government building, snapping sharply in the gentle ocean breeze. Inside this designated zone, crime scene technicians begin the harrowing task of documenting the chaos. They move with deliberate, careful steps, acutely aware that every inch of the concrete pavement holds critical evidence. The sheer volume of ballistic material scattered across the plaza paints a terrifying picture of the suspect's overwhelming firepower. Small, brightly colored evidence markers are placed next to each discarded shell casing. The numbers on these markers climb rapidly, providing a chilling visual representation of the lethal rain that was unleashed upon the officers. The brass casings glitter in the sunlight, innocent-looking cylinders of metal that stand in stark contrast to the massive devastation they left behind. The investigators analyze the heavy caliber of the military-grade casings, realizing immediately that they are dealing with a weapon system designed for warfare, not civilian intimidation. The trajectory analysis is equally grim. By tracing the impact craters gouged deep into the concrete facade of the government building and the shattered remnants of the thick architectural glass, the technicians are able to mathematically reconstruct the exact angles of the incoming fire. The geometry of the crime scene confirms the horrifying truth of the initial witness reports. This was not a run-and-gun battle, nor was it a chaotic, panicked exchange of fire. The tight grouping of the impacts and the strategic positioning of the shooter indicate a cold, calculated, and highly controlled execution. The perpetrator stood his ground, stabilized his heavy weapon, and systematically targeted the officers with maximum lethal efficiency. This clinical realization sends a shockwave of dread through the investigating team, as it completely eliminates the possibility of a crime of passion or a sudden, explosive loss of temper. They are hunting a predator who planned the slaughter with chilling precision. Simultaneously, the vital task of interviewing the surviving witnesses begins just beyond the perimeter of the yellow tape. The civilians, government clerks, and bystanders who were trapped in the crossfire are corralled into temporary holding areas, their faces pale and their hands trembling. The detectives approaching them must navigate a profound wall of psychological trauma. The witnesses are caught in a state of acute shock, their brains struggling to process the sudden intrusion of military violence into their peaceful morning routines. The investigators ask them to rewind their memories, to walk back through the deafening noise and the blinding flashes of the muzzle, and to pull out the defining features of the ghost who emerged from the bushes. The process is agonizing. Voices break, tears flow freely, and many witnesses can only describe the paralyzing fear that gripped them when the heavy rifle began to fire. But piece by piece, an overarching, terrifying narrative begins to emerge from the fragmented testimonies. The witnesses universally describe a profound, unnatural calmness surrounding the shooter. He did not scream, he did not run, and he did not cover his face. He operated with the terrifying, deliberate pace of a man performing a routine mechanical task. And most chillingly, after unleashing a devastating barrage of ammunition and watching the officers collapse onto the concrete, he simply lowered his weapon and walked away. He did not flee in a panic. He turned his back on the carnage and strode away into the heavy morning heat, melting back into the shadows of the island. Because he made no effort to conceal his identity, operating in broad daylight in the most public space on the island, the fragmented descriptions quickly coalesce into a single, highly recognizable image. The small, deeply interconnected nature of the island community, normally a source of comfort and strength, now becomes the greatest asset to the investigation. The face described by the traumatized bystanders is a face known to the community. Within hours of the echoing gunfire, a name solidifies in the command center, whispered at first with disbelief, and then repeated with a hard, uncompromising certainty: Siamo Jr. The identification of the suspect instantly sharpens the focus of the manhunt, transforming it from a desperate, blind sweep of the island into a targeted, highly dangerous tactical operation. The name provides the investigators with a fixed point, an anchor around which they can begin to pull the tight, suffocating net of their jurisdiction. Detectives immediately begin tearing into the suspect's background, searching for any potential safe houses, known associates, or geographical locations where a man armed with a heavy military weapon might seek refuge. They analyze his movements leading up to the morning of the massacre, desperately looking for the psychological tripwire that triggered this unprecedented act of domestic terrorism. Yet, the deeper they dig into the preliminary intelligence, the more confounding the reality becomes. The utter lack of a clear, immediate provocation or an escalating conflict that typically precedes such extreme violence makes the suspect entirely unpredictable. The investigators are forced to acknowledge that they are dealing with an individual operating outside the bounds of normal human reasoning, a man who has already crossed the ultimate threshold by publicly executing the highest symbol of law enforcement on the island. The tactical units tasked with physically locating and apprehending Siamo Jr. operate under an agonizing burden of tension. Every corner they turn, every thick grove of tropical vegetation they approach, and every silent residential street they patrol could be the site of a secondary ambush. They know the suspect is heavily armed, they know he is lethally accurate, and they know he has absolutely nothing left to lose. The memory of Major Brown's shattered body lying on the sunlit plaza is burned into the retinas of every officer gripping a rifle. The command staff issues strict, unwavering orders to maintain absolute professional discipline. The overwhelming urge for immediate, Violent retribution pulses through the ranks of the police force, a natural human response to the slaughter of one of their own. But the integrity of the justice system demands that the suspect be brought in alive to face the full, unyielding weight of the law. The officers must suppress their rage and rely entirely on their training, navigating the humid, claustrophobic environment of the island with slow, methodical precision. As the hours drag on, the suffocating heat of the afternoon sun beats down on the island, mirroring the rising temperature of the investigation. The dragnet tightens relentlessly. The geographical limitations of American Samoa finally exact their toll on the suspect. There is simply nowhere left to walk, nowhere left to hide from the overwhelming surge of law enforcement mobilizing against him. The meticulous collection of intelligence, combined with the sheer, overwhelming presence of officers blanketing the territory, inevitably corners the phantom who walked away from the plaza. When the confrontation finally occurs, it is starkly devoid of the explosive, cinematic shootout that the exhausted and traumatized officers had been bracing for. The heavy military weapon is secured, its catastrophic potential silenced. Siamo Jr. is placed in heavy steel restraints, his wrists locked tightly behind his back. As he is escorted into the back of an armored police vehicle, the same chilling, unnatural calmness that defined his actions on the plaza remains etched on his face. He offers no frantic resistance, no screaming justification, and no sudden display of remorse. The capture of the suspect brings the physical, active phase of the manhunt to an abrupt end, but it provides no immediate relief to the deeply traumatized law enforcement community. The flashing lights of the police cruiser transporting the killer fade into the distance, leaving the investigating detectives to face the most daunting phase of the crisis. They have secured the perimeter, they have meticulously collected the brass casings, they have painstakingly documented the bloodstains on the concrete, and they have successfully captured the man who pulled the trigger. But as they begin to compile the massive mountain of evidence and prepare to hand the case over to the territorial prosecutors, a new, bureaucratic nightmare begins to slowly materialize. The investigators realize, with a sinking feeling of dread, that capturing the killer was only the first, bloody hurdle. The evidence is absolutely unassailable. The witness testimonies are locked in, the ballistics are perfectly matched, and the chain of custody is flawlessly maintained. There is no mystery regarding the identity of the shooter or the mechanics of the crime. However, the sheer, unprecedented magnitude of the massacre has pushed the investigation entirely out of the realm of standard criminal procedure. The detectives understand that they are not just preparing a murder docket, they are preparing a case for the ultimate punishment. The brutal public execution of a high-ranking police officer demands a legal response of equal, devastating severity. As the exhausted investigators compile their final reports in the quiet, grim atmosphere of the precinct, the conversation inevitably shifts toward the darkest, most archaic corners of the territorial legal code. The realization sets in that the modern justice system of American Samoa is entirely unprepared to handle the monster they have just caught. To find a punishment that fits the crime, the investigators and the prosecutors will be forced to reach back across 70 years of peaceful history, blowing the dust off a dormant statute that no one on the island ever believed they would have to use. The street investigation has concluded, but the unprecedented legal war over the fate of Siamo Jr. is just beginning. The aftermath of the arrest of Siamo Jr. did not bring a sense of closure to the territory of American Samoa. Instead, it opened a profound and agonizing legal Pandora's box. The sheer magnitude of the public execution of Major Lucilla Brown forced the territorial government into a position of unprecedented moral and legal gravity. The prosecution team, faced with the horrific reality of the crime scene and the chilling, cold-blooded manner in which the defendant had carried out his plan, concluded that standard life imprisonment was an insufficient response to such an extreme violation of the social contract. In their view, the calculated, military-style slaughter of a high-ranking officer in the heart of the government plaza demanded the ultimate punishment. Consequently, the authorities made the historic and traumatic decision to invoke the death penalty, a legal mechanism that had been effectively frozen in the territory's statute books since 1939. This decision sent shockwaves through the judicial system, transforming the upcoming trial from a standard murder prosecution into a complex, existential debate over the very definition of justice in a modern Pacific territory. The courtroom became the focal point of the island's collective trauma, a crucible where the emotions of a grieving community clashed directly with the cold, rigid requirements of the law. The trial proceedings were defined by an atmosphere of suffocating tension that permeated every corner of the judicial building. Every session was a grueling exercise in emotional endurance, as the prosecution meticulously reconstructed the events of that fateful July morning. They presented the evidence with a clinical precision that sought to strip away any ambiguity, leaving the jury with a clear, undeniable picture of a man who had planned and executed a massacre with cold, machine-like efficiency. The testimony of the surviving witnesses was particularly agonizing. These individuals, many of whom were still struggling with the psychological scars of that day, were forced to relive their deepest trauma in front of a gallery filled with the victims' colleagues, family, and the entire island populace. They recounted the deafening roar of the military-grade weapon, the sight of the officers falling to the concrete, and the eerie, emotionless composure of the defendant as he walked away from the slaughter. The defense, meanwhile, faced the impossible task of arguing for a man whose actions had left absolutely no room for doubt or defense. They were effectively trying to mitigate the unmitigable, forced to navigate a legal landscape where their client's guilt was as clear as the bright, tropical sun that had illuminated the crime. As the trial progressed toward its inevitable conclusion, the legal arguments became entangled in a surreal and deeply ironic debate over the logistics of state-sanctioned execution. While the prosecution hammered home the necessity of the death penalty as the only proportionate response to the crime, a terrifying, logistical reality began to emerge from the background of the case. The American Samoa legal system, despite its adherence to the formal statutes allowing for capital punishment, had not actually executed a prisoner in over 7 decades. Because the territory had remained a peaceful enclave for so long, the government had never found it necessary to build, maintain, or prepare a chamber for carrying out such a sentence. The legal team realized that their victory in the courtroom, the successful securing of a death sentence, might be functionally impossible to implement. There was no facility, no trained personnel, and no established protocol for the execution of a prisoner in the territory. The discussion transitioned from the moral justification of the penalty to the practical and ultimately embarrassing reality that the territory lacked the fundamental infrastructure to fulfill its own supreme law. This realization created a profound sense of frustration and helplessness among the victims' families and the wider community. The public appetite for the execution of Sialmo was intense. The wound left by the death of Major Brown was too deep to be satisfied by anything less than the highest possible consequence. Every day in the courtroom was marked by the presence of police officers in full uniform, their faces hard and grim, serving as a silent, powerful reminder of the comrade they had lost. The courtroom was a place where justice was being pursued in its most traditional form, yet the wheels of the law were grinding against a wall of historical stagnation. The prosecution argued that the lack of infrastructure was a failing that could be corrected, that the state had an obligation to build what was necessary to carry out the sentence of the court. However, the legal hurdles grew exponentially with every passing week. Appeals were filed, challenges were raised, and the entire process became caught in a slow, agonizing bureaucratic quagmire. The death penalty, once envisioned as the final, definitive resolution to the case, had instead become a source of prolonged, excruciating uncertainty. Inside the courtroom, the defendant remained a disturbing, enigmatic presence. Throughout the trial, he displayed the same eerie detachment that had marked his actions on the plaza. He sat motionless, his expression unreadable, showing absolutely no signs of remorse or internal struggle. This lack of humanity served only to harden the resolve of the community, who viewed him as a fundamentally broken entity that had no place in their society. The trial became a mirror, reflecting the territory's own internal conflict between the ancient, primal desire for vengeance and the modern, legalistic framework of the democratic state. The prosecution played a masterful game of narrative control, portraying Siamo as the ultimate threat to the territory's existence, while the defense fought to keep the proceedings centered on the technical requirements of the law. Yet, despite the brilliant legal maneuvering on both sides, the dark shadow of the non-existent execution chamber loomed over everything. The jury, tasked with rendering a verdict in a case of such immense historical and moral weight, felt the crushing pressure of the entire island's gaze. They were not just deciding the fate of one man, they were deciding how American Samoa would define itself in the wake of its greatest tragedy. As the sentencing phase approached, the courtroom became an arena of raw, unfiltered grief and professional, stoic resolve. The impact statements from Major Brown's family were devastating, filling the room with a sense of loss that felt physical, something that could be reached out and touched. They spoke of a man who was the bedrock of their lives, a professional who had dedicated his existence to the service of his people, and a human being who had been stolen in a moment of arbitrary, senseless violence. These statements served as a brutal, necessary counterpoint to the legal technicalities being argued by the defense. They reminded everyone in the room that the trial was not about statutes, protocols, or the lack of an execution chamber. It was about the life of a man who would never walk the streets of Pago Pago again. The jury's deliberation was agonizingly long, a reflection of the profound responsibility they felt. When they finally returned, the courtroom was plunged into a state of absolute, breathless silence. The death sentence was passed, a clear and decisive statement from the representatives of the community. But the celebration of justice was tempered by the immediate, crushing realization of the reality that awaited the sentence outside the courtroom walls. The years that followed the conviction were characterized by a grueling, repetitive cycle of appeals and legal maneuvers that seemed to drain the life force from the entire judicial system. The territory was forced to grapple with the reality that, while the court could dictate the death penalty, the government could not feasibly implement it. The legal status of Siamo remained in a state of suspended animation, trapped in a transition period that lasted far longer than anyone had ever anticipated. Every time a new motion was filed, it reopened the old, jagged wounds of the community, forcing them to look back at the plaza, at the blood on the concrete, and at the ghost of Major Brown. The inability of the justice system to carry out the ultimate sentence of its own creation served as a constant, nagging reminder of the territory's vulnerability. It highlighted the uncomfortable truth that American Samoa had been forced to enter a new, violent epoch, but they had not yet developed the tools to survive or respond effectively within that new reality. The legal saga of Siamo Jr. had become a permanent part of the island's landscape, a dark, unresolved chapter that refused to turn. Ultimately, the process demonstrated the fundamental friction between the desire for absolute justice and the limitations of modern administrative governance. The territory was caught between two worlds, the small, interconnected, and historically peaceful community they once were, and the modern, dangerous environment they were now forced to inhabit. The failure to carry out the death sentence was not a failure of law, but a symptom of the territory's transition. They were living in a landscape where the old rules were still on the books, but the necessary foundations to enforce them had vanished long ago. As the case dragged on into its fifth year, the weariness of the public began to overtake the initial, volcanic rage. The legal proceedings became a background noise, a steady, rhythmic thrum of unresolved tension that defined the atmosphere of the administrative center. The community began to realize that the pursuit of the ultimate penalty was a Pyrrhic victory, a quest that had consumed far more energy and emotional capital than it had ever returned in justice. They were a people holding a piece of paper that commanded a finality they could not physically achieve. The legal battle had become a prison of its own making, a testament to the fact that when the foundation of a society is violently shaken, the process of recovery is not a single act, but a long, agonizing struggle that leaves no one truly whole. The final chapters of the case were destined to be written not in the language of vengeance, but in the language of survival, as the territory slowly began to accept the complex, unsatisfying realities of a world where their perfect, sheltered peace had been permanently extinguished. The passage of time in American Samoa did not function as a curative balm for the collective trauma of the community. Instead, it acted as a slow-motion crystallization of the incident into the permanent bedrock of the territory's identity. As the legal quagmire regarding the impossibility of the death penalty reached its definitive end in 2016, the final transition to a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole served as a pragmatic, if emotionally hollow, conclusion to the immediate judicial crisis. Siamo Jr. was permanently removed from the public sphere, confined to the rigid, predictable existence of a high-security prison environment. Yet, for the people of Pago Pago, the closure provided by the sentencing was far from absolute. The physical absence of the perpetrator did nothing to scrub the psychological stain from the administrative plaza, nor did it replace the void left by the assassination of Major Lucilla Brown. The territory had been forced to mature overnight, transitioning from an insular, trusting paradise into a society acutely aware of its own fragility and the existence of deep, dark currents of human malice that could break through the surface at any moment. The legacy of the 2010 massacre manifested as a profound and permanent shift in the relationship between the government and the community it served. The government building, once an open, inviting symbol of civic participation, underwent a quiet but unmistakable metamorphosis. The barriers to entry became more rigid, the security protocols became more visible, and the feeling of ease that had characterized the interactions between the police and the public was replaced by a sharper, more analytical vigilance. Major Brown, in his death, had become an icon, a tragic martyr whose memory was invoked whenever the discussion turned to the necessity of law and order in a modernizing territory. His sacrifice transformed the culture of the police force itself. The complacency of the past, that distinct lack of tactical awareness that had rendered the officers so vulnerable on that July morning, was thoroughly purged from the training manuals and the psyche of the force. The officers who patrolled the island in the years following the event walked with a different posture, their eyes constantly scanning the environment with an ingrained caution that spoke of a loss they would never fully process. The emotional ripples of the tragedy extended far beyond the immediate circle of the victims' families and the colleagues who had stood by their sides at the scene. Every citizen of American Samoa had, in some way, been forced to adjust their worldview. The crime had breached the perimeter of their safety, proving that the vast Pacific Ocean was no longer a sufficient barrier against the dark, violent realities of the outside world. This realization prompted a lingering, existential anxiety. For years, the island had defined itself by its immunity. After the massacre, it had to define itself by its resilience. This process was not without its scars. The debate over the death penalty, the embarrassment of the missing execution facilities, and the protracted, exhausting legal battles all served to reveal the limitations of the territory's institutional capacity. It forced a candid, and often painful, self-reflection about what it meant to be a modern territory operating under American law while maintaining a distinct, tight-knit, and historically peaceful cultural identity. The community had been exposed to the raw, unfiltered savagery of a singular, motivated individual, and they were left with the daunting task of building a new stability upon a foundation that felt, to many, permanently shattered. The memory of the event itself began to take on a mythic quality, woven into the oral history of the island as the day the sun went out. People who were present on the plaza, those who heard the initial cracks of the gunfire, and those who arrived in the immediate aftermath were left with indelible, sensory-locked memories that no amount of time could fully blur. They remembered the specific shade of the sky, the exact way the heat felt on their skin, and the jarring, visceral contrast between the peaceful morning routine and the sudden, mechanical brutality of the ambush. These individual stories became the threads of a collective tapestry of trauma. While the legal files were eventually closed and the case files archived, the event remained a recurring subject of private conversation, a ghost that walked through the streets of Pago Pago, reminding everyone that peace is not a static state of nature, but a fragile accomplishment that must be constantly maintained. The story of Siamo Jr. became a cautionary tale, stripped of any attempt at romanticization or sympathetic interpretation, treated instead as a grim reminder of the destructive power of unchecked human malice. In the final analysis, the tragedy of July 22, 2010, serves as a testament to the fact that the most profound shifts in human society are often initiated by singular, violent, and devastating moments that defy the prevailing narrative of their time. The island of American Samoa, through no fault of its own, was cast into the role of a tragic actor in a drama it never requested. The loss of Major Lucilla Brown was the loss of a pillar of the community, but the resulting shockwave caused a structural shift in the territory that redefined the parameters of civil life. The trauma, the subsequent legal failure, and the ultimate move toward a life sentence created a permanent change in the territory's trajectory. They were no longer the island that had forgotten what violence looked like. They were the island that had looked violence in the eye and had been forced to construct a new way of existing in its shadow. The scar left on the concrete of the plaza had long since been repaired, and the building stood functional once again, but the historical record of the event remained as a stark, unmoving marker in the timeline of the territory. As the years continue to pass, the event recedes further into the distance, yet its influence remains etched into the institutional memory of the American Samoan government. The commitment to maintaining the safety of the territory, the professionalization of the police force, and the sober, grounded approach to criminal justice are all products of the lessons learned in the wake of the massacre. The community moved forward, demonstrating a remarkable capacity to heal, yet they did so with a newfound wisdom. They accepted that the paradise they called home was not immune to the darkness of the human condition. They learned that the strength of a society is not found in its ability to ignore potential threats, but in its ability to confront them, to process the devastation, and to rebuild on the understanding that safety is a shared, deliberate responsibility. The story of Major Brown and the tragedy on the plaza is not just a true crime narrative. It is the story of a territory's coming of age, a process defined by a singular, heartbreaking morning that permanently altered the course of their future. Even now, as the Pacific waves continue their ancient, relentless rhythm against the shores of Pago Pago, the memory of that day remains a somber anchor in the history of the island. It serves as a reminder that the price of peace is constant vigilance, and that the value of the individuals who stand between the community and the encroaching darkness is beyond measure. The life of Major Lucilla Brown, characterized by service, duty, and professional integrity, stands as the enduring focal point of the story, eclipsing the dark, singular purpose of the man who took it. While the killer has been relegated to the oblivion of a prison cell, the legacy of the Major lives on in the improved systems of the territory, in the refined tactical awareness of the officers, and in the collective, quiet strength of a people who have endured an unthinkable nightmare and have emerged on the other side. The island continues to evolve, balancing its deep-seated traditions with the modern realities of its status, but the lessons of that day are woven into the very fabric of its current existence. It is a story of profound loss, of legal and moral failure, and ultimately, of the persistent, quiet determination of a community to redefine itself in the wake of a tragedy that threatened to shatter everything they held dear. The peaceful rhythm has returned to the streets, the children play in the sun, and the government carries on its daily tasks, but the shadow of that morning remains, not as an oppressive force, but as a silent, solemn sentinel, ensuring that the sacrifice of those who fell on the plaza is never forgotten, and that the sanctity of their peaceful home is protected with a new, uncompromising resolve. Through the pain of the past, the territory found a path toward a more hardened, realistic future, acknowledging that while they can never return to the innocence that existed before the first shot was fired, they have successfully forged a new, enduring identity in the aftermath of the storm, standing resilient and united against the echoes of the dark morning that forever changed their world. The conclusion of the legal saga and the subsequent years of normalization in American Samoa do not, in any sense, diminish the complexity of the philosophical and social questions that continue to reverberate from the tragedy. The case of Siamo Jr. remains a singular study in the fragility of public trust and the profound disconnect between the mechanisms of justice and the realities of small island governance. As time moves forward, the focus of the community has gradually shifted from the immediate, visceral shock of the assassination to a more systemic analysis of how such an event could have happened in the first place. The territory, in its quest to rebuild, has had to confront the reality that its previous model of operation, characterized by an implicit, almost familial trust, was fundamentally incompatible with the rising challenges of a modern era. This realization has prompted an internal evolution, one that is visible in the structural, cultural, and political changes that now define the relationship between the government and the populace. The incident has left an indelible mark, serving as a permanent baseline for how the territory evaluates its internal security, the training of its public servants, and the preparedness of its legal apparatus to handle the most extreme manifestations of human conflict. One of the most enduring consequences of the event is the transformation of the collective memory of the plaza itself. For the generation that was present on that morning in July 2010, the government building is no longer just a center of administrative activity. It is a repository of shared, painful history. Every time a citizen walks across that concrete expanse, there is an implicit awareness of the fragility of the space. This subtle, pervasive consciousness of history acts as a binding agent for the community, ensuring that the tragedy is not relegated to the footnotes of a textbook. It is a living memory, one that is transmitted through the unspoken behaviors of those who knew the victims and those who lived through the fear of the manhunt. The act of public remembrance has become a quiet, consistent feature of the territory's cultural rhythm, a way of affirming that despite the horror that occurred, the values Major Lucilla Brown stood for, duty, courage, and public service, remain the guiding principles of the community. This persistent focus on the victim, rather than the perpetrator, is a deliberate social choice, a way of ensuring that the narrative remains anchored in the humanity of those who were lost. Furthermore, the legal fallout of the case provided a sobering wake-up call regarding the necessity of institutional modernization. The territory learned in the most brutal fashion that justice is not merely a theoretical construct based on dormant statutes, but a physical system that requires constant maintenance, funding, and logistical readiness. The embarrassment and the profound public frustration that followed the inability to implement the death penalty forced the territorial government to undertake a comprehensive review of its entire criminal justice pipeline. From the way crime scenes are processed by forensic technicians to the way the judiciary handles high-profile, complex prosecutions, every aspect of the system was scrutinized for its ability to function under the strain of a major crisis. This administrative hardening has resulted in a more resilient and capable government, one that is significantly better equipped to manage the pressures of a contemporary society. The tragedy forced the territory to move past the romanticized version of its history and into a more pragmatic, realistic approach to the responsibilities of self-governance. In the realm of international perception, the events of 2010 temporarily shattered the idyllic image of American Samoa, forcing the territory to manage the fallout of being associated with an act of domestic terrorism. The news cycle, which briefly fixated on the unprecedented nature of the crime, eventually moved on, but the permanent record of the event remains a part of the territory's geopolitical identity. Being a small, remote U.S. territory, American Samoa exists in a unique space, and the assassination highlighted the logistical difficulties inherent in its jurisdiction. The cooperation with federal agencies, which became necessary to ensure that the investigation was conducted with the highest levels of rigor and compliance, marked a new era in the territorial police force's engagement with mainland counterparts. This collaborative framework, born of the necessity to solve a catastrophe, has continued to pay dividends, allowing the local authorities to operate with a higher degree of professional integration and access to technical resources than they ever possessed before. The tragedy, in this sense, accelerated the professionalization of the entire territorial security apparatus, forcing an alignment with modern standards that might have otherwise taken decades to achieve. The psychological resilience of the survivors, the surviving officers, the civilian witnesses, and the families of the fallen has also become a cornerstone of the territory's post-tragedy narrative. The journey of these individuals from the moment of the assault to the finality of the sentencing is a profound testament to the human capacity to persist in the face of absolute despair. Many of those who were physically present on that morning have chosen to remain in public service, using the memory of their colleagues as a source of professional purpose and personal strength. Their continued contribution to the island's safety is perhaps the most significant rebuttal to the shooter's attempt to destabilize the community. By refusing to be defined by the trauma of that day and instead choosing to continue the work that Major Brown started, these individuals have ensured that the spirit of the police force remains unbroken. Their resilience has become a model for the younger generations of officers who are now entering the force, serving as a reminder that the path to justice is long, often painful, and requires a steady, unwavering commitment to the principles of the law, regardless of the darkness one might encounter along the way. Looking toward the future, the lessons learned from the assassination of Major Lucilla Brown continue to inform the territorial policy and the broader discourse on public safety. The balance between maintaining the open, community-oriented nature of the islands and ensuring the necessary security for public officials remains a dynamic challenge, one that is navigated with a careful, nuanced approach. The territory has accepted that it cannot return to the past, but it has also refused to adopt a posture of fear. It has found a middle ground, a way of existing that respects the importance of the individual, the sanctity of the community, and the necessity of firm, capable governance. The story of what happened on the plaza is no longer just a narrative of violence. It is a narrative of evolution, of a society that has successfully navigated the most difficult challenge in its modern history and emerged on the other side with a clearer, more grounded understanding of its place in the world. The memory of the event remains a part of the landscape, much like the volcanic mountains or the crashing surf, a constant feature that reminds the inhabitants of the complexity and the beauty of the life they are privileged to lead. As the final analysis of this historic case rests in the annals of the territory, it is evident that the true measure of their success lies not in the finality of the sentencing or the efficiency of the legal process, but in the enduring strength of the community. The tragedy did not break the islands. It revealed the hidden, internal structures of support and mutual care that define the people of American Samoa. The fact that the territory, despite all its internal frictions and the massive scale of the trauma, maintained its commitment to the rule of law and the dignity of the democratic process is the true victory. The legacy of Major Lucilla Brown is not the violence that took his life, but the stability, the professionalism, and the collective purpose that his memory has inspired in those who followed him. The plaza stands as a symbol of that victory, a place where life continues, where duty is performed, and where the community gathers, aware of the past, but resolutely focused on the future. The events of July 2010 are an immutable part of the territory's history, a dark chapter that can never be erased, but it is a chapter that has been followed by years of recovery, growth, and a deepening of the bonds that tie the citizens together. The story concludes not with the silence of a victim, but with the active, ongoing pursuit of a safe and prosperous future, a future built on the hard-won wisdom that, in the face of the most extreme adversity, a community defined by its shared humanity will always find a way to endure and eventually flourish once again, carrying the memory of those they have lost as a guide for all the days to come. The final reflection on the assassination of Major Lucilla Brown necessitates an examination of the broader, existential implications for a territory that occupies such a unique intersection of American legal tradition and Pacific cultural history. As we look back from the vantage point of the present, the event stands not merely as an isolated incident of criminal violence, but as a defining socio-political rupture that effectively partitioned the timeline of American Samoa into two distinct eras, the Age of Innocence and the Age of Awareness. This transition, while painful and characterized by immense institutional suffering, has ultimately provided the foundation for a more mature, realistic approach to the responsibilities of self-governance. The tragedy served as a brutal, unforgiving catalyst, forcing the territory to confront the inherent limitations of its inherited structures and to undertake the difficult, often agonizing process of realigning its internal mechanisms to better reflect the realities of the modern, interconnected world. This was not merely an administrative upgrade. It was an act of profound cultural and social maturation that fundamentally altered the way in which the territory perceives its own security, its legal obligations, and the sanctity of the public sphere. The endurance of the victim's memory, Major Lucilla Brown, remains the most significant and transformative aspect of this entire historical narrative. In a territory where personal and communal bonds are the primary currency of social existence, the loss of an officer of his stature and character was felt as a deep, structural wound to the collective psyche. By focusing on his life, his commitment to his colleagues, his unwavering sense of duty, and his role as a representative of the law in a community that valued its peace above almost everything else, the people of American Samoa effectively managed to wrest the narrative away from the perpetrator. The killer, whose primary objective was surely the dissemination of fear and the destruction of the status quo, ultimately failed in his long-term goal. He succeeded only in creating a permanent, tragic mark on the calendar, while the memory of Major Brown was elevated to a position of near-mythic importance, symbolizing the very virtues that the territory sought to preserve. This shift in focus is a critical indicator of the community's resilience. It demonstrates a conscious effort to ensure that the final legacy of the day is defined by the valor of the one who is lost, rather than the malice of the one who committed the act. Furthermore, the legal complications surrounding the failed invocation of the death penalty have left a lasting, cautionary legacy for the territory's judicial evolution. The experience taught the legislative and judicial branches of government that the possession of a statute book is not the same as the possession of a functional justice system. This realization initiated a profound process of institutional introspection, where the government was forced to align its legal theory with its actual, lived reality. The embarrassment associated with the lack of infrastructure to carry out the court's own sentences was a powerful motivator for the subsequent reforms that were implemented across the criminal justice sector. Today, the administration of justice in American Samoa is significantly more robust, transparent, and logistically capable than it was in 2010. The system is no longer operating on the inertia of historical peace. It is built on the hard-won understanding that the protection of the community requires a consistent, active, and well-resourced dedication to the principles of law. This institutional hardening, while born of tragedy, has ensured that the territory is never again caught in a state of paralyzing unpreparedness. The international and federal context of the tragedy also highlighted the unique nature of the relationship between American Samoa and the United States. The influx of federal expertise, the coordination with mainland agencies, and the intense scrutiny that followed the assassination underscored the reality that the territory does not exist in a vacuum. It is a vital, albeit remote, component of a larger national framework, and the events of 2010 brought this reality into sharp focus for both the local populace and the federal authorities. The tragedy necessitated a high level of cooperation that became a benchmark for future crises, setting a standard for how the territory can effectively leverage external resources while maintaining its essential, distinct identity. This evolution toward a more integrated, globally aware posture is a direct response to the vulnerability exposed by the shooting, and it remains a critical aspect of how the island plans to manage its safety and governance moving forward in an increasingly unstable world. The human element of this story, the survivors, the witnesses, and the families, serves as a poignant reminder that while institutions can be reformed and laws can be updated, the experience of trauma is a deeply personal, ongoing journey. The community's embrace of those most affected by the massacre has been a quiet, persistent, and vital part of the recovery process. By prioritizing the mental and emotional well-being of those who bore the brunt of the tragedy, the territory has demonstrated a level of empathy and communal solidarity that serves as the true indicator of its strength. It is this capacity for collective healing that has allowed the residents of Pago Pago to reclaim their city as a place of life rather than a site of death. The plaza, which once felt haunted by the echoes of gunfire, has been reclaimed through use, through ceremony, and through the persistent, quiet resilience of the people who continue to walk its pathways in the pursuit of their daily lives. The shadow of the event will always remain, but it no longer defines the community's experience of its own environment. In synthesizing the lessons of this case, it is evident that the assassination of Major Lucilla Brown was the defining ordeal of modern American Samoa. It tested the territory's capacity to remain faithful to its values under the extreme pressure of an existential threat. The tragedy stripped away the comfortable illusions of total security, but in doing so, it provided the territory with the clarity required to build a more authentic, grounded vision of the future. The evolution of the territorial police force, the refinement of the judicial processes, and the deepening of the community bonds are all tangible expressions of a people who have refused to be broken. They have taken the raw, jagged material of their most horrific experience and used it as the foundation for a more mature, secure, and unified identity. This is the ultimate triumph of the community over the tragedy. They have not simply moved on, but have fundamentally redefined themselves in the process, ensuring that the legacy of their fallen officer is honored not just by words, but by the ongoing, steady work of building a society that is worthy of his memory. Ultimately, the story of what occurred in Pago Pago is a testament to the persistent nature of human society to adapt to even the most cataclysmic changes. The territory, in its quest for safety, discovered that they possessed a well of collective strength that went far beyond what anyone had anticipated. They learned that the most effective way to confront a future defined by uncertainty is to remain deeply connected to one another, to approach the challenges of governance with an uncompromising sense of professional duty, and to remember that the sanctity of their peaceful home is a collaborative, ongoing achievement. As the narrative of this case is finalized and tucked away into the historical archives, it remains an essential pillar of their identity, a reminder of where they have been, a reflection of the challenges they have overcome, and a beacon for the values they continue to uphold. The memory of July 22, 2010, is no longer a burden. It is a vital, grounding truth that allows the people of American Samoa to look ahead with confidence, knowing that they have faced the worst and emerged from the storm with a clearer vision of who they are and who they intend to be. The Pacific wind continues to blow, the waves continue their rhythmic crash against the volcanic shores, and the territory continues to progress, held together by the quiet, enduring resolve of a people who have seen the dark and have chosen, every single day, to turn toward the light, honoring the life of the one who is lost by dedicating themselves to the safety and the flourishing of the many. The concluding perspective on the tragedy in Pago Pago requires a final, deliberate meditation on the nature of peace and the persistent effort required to maintain it in a world that is fundamentally unpredictable. The assassination of Major Lisla Brown did not merely mark a point in time. It served as a permanent, immovable landmark in the history of American Samoa, acting as a testament to the fact that security is never a static achievement, but rather a continuous, active process of engagement. As the territory moved further away from the immediate aftermath of the 2010 massacre, the initial, frantic need for structural reform and defensive hardening began to mellow into a more internalized, philosophical understanding of their place within the broader geopolitical landscape. This evolution represents the final stage of the territory's recovery, the acceptance that while the innocence of the past can never be reclaimed, the strength developed in the wake of such a cataclysm is a more durable and reliable foundation for the future. The people of Pago Pago have effectively transitioned from a state of reactive survival to a proactive state of civic maturity, where the memory of the fallen is integrated into the daily practice of governance, policing, and community life. This mature perspective is most evident in the current operation of the Territorial Police Force. The officers who walk the beat today are the custodians of a legacy that is both somber and empowering. They understand that their profession is not merely a job but a vital, protective function that holds the fragile fabric of their society together. The intense focus on training, the emphasis on tactical readiness, and the adoption of modern investigative technologies are no longer seen as aggressive or unnecessary impositions. They are recognized as the basic requirements of a society that has learned the hard way that threats can emerge from the shadows of their own tropical home. This shift in professional consciousness is perhaps the most significant outcome of the tragedy. It has replaced the complacency of the past with a balanced, vigilant professionalism that respects the unique cultural fabric of the island while upholding the non-negotiable standards of modern law enforcement. The memory of Major Brown is the invisible presence in every briefing room, every patrol car, and every court proceeding, serving as an unyielding standard of service that reminds the officers of the gravity of their oath. On a deeper, societal level, the massacre prompted a fundamental reevaluation of the American Samoan identity in relation to the broader American legal and political framework. The failure of the death penalty process highlighted the gap between the theoretical power of the state and the practical capacity of the territory to implement that power. This realization, while initially a source of frustration and public embarrassment, eventually led to a more grounded and realistic engagement with the constitutional and administrative complexities of their status. The territory has become more adept at navigating the relationship between local custom and the mandates of the federal system, creating a hybrid approach to governance that is both respectful of their unique history and aligned with the requirements of the modern age. This sophistication in political and legal maneuvering is a direct byproduct of the crisis. It forced the territory to grapple with its own identity in a way that would have been impossible during the decades of relative isolation and undisturbed peace. The role of the community in sustaining this long-term recovery cannot be overstated. The resilience of the people of American Samoa is not just an abstract concept. It is a lived reality demonstrated in the way they continue to support the families of the victims and the way they participate in the public life of the island. By refusing to let the horror of the event paralyze their social development, they have proven that the true strength of their society lies in their interconnectedness. The collective mourning that characterized the weeks and months after the shooting has evolved into a quiet, enduring respect for the past. This respect is not a form of stagnation, it is a form of anchoring. By remembering what was lost, the community ensures that it never loses sight of what is most important: the safety of their neighbors, the integrity of their public servants, and the fundamental right to live in a society governed by the rule of law. The tragedy has effectively tightened the social bonds of the islands, fostering a sense of shared purpose that is stronger today than it was before the massacre. Looking forward, the narrative of this tragedy should be understood as a vital, foundational text for any small, peaceful community attempting to navigate the complexities of the modern world. It offers a grim but necessary lesson that, even in the most protected environments, the possibility of sudden, senseless violence exists, and the only effective response to that reality is a combination of institutional preparedness, communal solidarity, and an unwavering commitment to the preservation of human dignity. The story of what happened in Pago Pago will continue to be told to future generations, not to perpetuate the fear of the shooter, but to honor the life of the major and to teach the youth that the peace they enjoy is a precious, fragile, and essential gift that must be protected with diligence. The history of the event is a warning, yes, but it is also a beacon, illustrating the capacity of a people to confront the unthinkable and to build a better, more secure future from the ruins of their past. In the end, the resonance of this case lies in its universality. It is a story of a community that found itself at the epicenter of a tragedy, and through the persistent, methodical, and often agonizing process of recovery, redefined itself as something stronger and more resilient than it had ever been before. The memory of the event is not a weight that pulls the territory down. It is a ballast that keeps it steady as it navigates the unpredictable waters of the 21st century. The legacy of Major Lucilla Brown is thus preserved not in stone or static monument, but in the vibrant, ongoing life of the territory he served. His life is reflected in the safety of the streets, the integrity of the courts, and the unified spirit of the people. The tragedy was a sudden, violent, and permanent intrusion, but it did not define the end of their story. Instead, it marked the beginning of a long, challenging, and ultimately noble journey toward a new understanding of what it means to be a society grounded in duty, protected by law, and bound together by an unbreakable sense of community. As we conclude this detailed examination of the tragedy, we are reminded of the profound human cost of public service and the irreplaceable value of the individuals who dedicate their lives to the protection of their fellow citizens. The narrative of the 2010 massacre is a heavy one, demanding a level of focus and emotional honesty that is taxing to maintain, but it is a necessary endeavor. By documenting the facts, analyzing the systemic failures and successes, and reflecting on the social impact, We honor the truth of what occurred, and we ensure that the lessons learned are not lost to time. The territory of American Samoa stands today as a testament to the fact that healing is possible, that institutional growth is achievable, and that the fundamental goodness of a community can eventually overcome even the most devastating challenges. The Pacific continues to hold the island in its embrace. The sun continues to rise over the verdant slopes, and the people of Pago Pago continue their work, carrying the heavy, beautiful burden of their history with a quiet, persistent, and unwavering dignity that would have made their fallen major proud. The journey through the darkness has been completed, and the territory now faces the light with a hardened wisdom, an unshakable sense of purpose, and a renewed commitment to the peaceful future that they have fought so hard to reclaim and to secure for all the generations yet to come. The final chapter of this narrative is not one of closure, but one of continued existence, an ongoing testament to the fact that in the face of absolute darkness, the light of human decency and the rule of law can and must prevail, serving as the guiding principle for the persistent, ongoing work of building a society that is safe, just, and profoundly worthy of the lives of those who gave everything to defend it. The final synthesis of this narrative requires a return to the quiet, mundane reality of the Pago Pago Administrative Plaza, a place that now exists in a dual capacity as both a center of government and a solemn monument to the past. As the years have unfolded, the plaza has seen the constant, rhythmic flow of daily life return, yet the space retains a psychological weight that distinguishes it from any other location on the island. It is in this environment of normalcy that the true nature of the territory's recovery is most apparent. The transition from the acute, paralyzing horror of the 2010 massacre to the present day is not characterized by a dramatic erasure of the event, but rather by the successful integration of that tragedy into a broader, more resilient social fabric. The citizens of American Samoa have managed to transform the plaza from a site of trauma into a site of endurance, ensuring that the legacy of Major Lucilla Brown is not defined by the violence that ended his life, but by the ongoing commitment of the community to the values he championed. This evolution represents the most significant victory of the collective over the individual act of malice, proving that even the most devastating intrusions can be absorbed and ultimately repurposed into a narrative of continuity. The enduring success of the territorial government in the wake of such a crisis provides a valuable framework for understanding how remote, insular communities can adapt to the modern global reality of security threats. The institutional hardening that followed the massacre, the recalibration of police training, the modernization of forensic procedures, and the strengthening of interagency cooperation has created a state of preparedness that did not exist during the era of innocence. This shift is not merely functional, it is a manifestation of the community's maturity. By acknowledging the reality of external dangers, the territory has effectively ended its period of historical naivety, choosing instead to occupy a space of informed vigilance. This is not a posture of fear, but one of professionalized respect for the dangers that the contemporary world presents. It is a necessary hardening that has allowed the people of the islands to continue living their lives with a level of security that is not based on the hope of immunity, but on the reality of competence and readiness. As we reflect on the role of justice in this narrative, it is clear that the frustration born of the death penalty's impossibility served as a necessary catalyst for a deeper, more sophisticated understanding of the legal process. The territory's inability to act on the ultimate punishment forced a transition away from a desire for primitive, retributive justice toward a more complex reliance on the rule of law as a persistent, foundational commitment. The life sentence imposed upon Siamo Jr. became more than just a punishment. It became a symbol of the territory's choice to operate within the established boundaries of the American legal tradition, even when that choice was politically and emotionally difficult. This adherence to the rule of law, in the face of immense public pressure for a more final form of retribution, solidified the territory's reputation as a community that values its adherence to democratic principles above the temptation to bypass those principles for the sake of expediency. This was a critical turning point in the territory's history, marking its transition into a modern, legally grounded society. The psychological journey of the survivors remains the most profound aspect of this ongoing story. Their refusal to surrender to bitterness or to let their professional lives be derailed by the trauma of that morning has been the bedrock upon which the community's healing has been built. The surviving officers, in particular, have carried the weight of their colleagues' loss with an extraordinary dignity, transforming their personal grief into a mission of duty that has inspired the entire island. Their continued presence on the force, their commitment to mentoring new recruits, and their participation in the quiet rituals of remembrance have provided a necessary consistency to the territory's post-tragedy life. They are the living embodiment of the resolve to persevere, standing as a testament to the fact that while the scars of trauma remain, they do not have to dictate the direction of one's future. The community, in turn, has provided a level of support and recognition that validates their service, creating a virtuous cycle of mutual respect that is the ultimate bulwark against the destabilizing forces of criminal violence. Furthermore, the integration of this tragedy into the oral history and cultural consciousness of the island ensures that the lessons of the past will continue to inform the actions of the future. The story is no longer a raw, open wound, but a part of the territory's collective narrative, a cautionary tale of what can be lost and a triumphant record of what can be preserved. This preservation of memory is essential. It keeps the community tethered to the reality of the danger they once faced while simultaneously reinforcing the strength they found to confront it. By passing this history down to the younger generations, the territory ensures that the peace they enjoy today is understood not as a given right, but as a hard-won condition that requires constant stewardship and the willingness to defend it. This is the ultimate, long-term victory over the perpetrator's attempt to destabilize the social order. The threat itself has become a pedagogical tool, a means of strengthening the very society it intended to destroy. As we look toward the horizon, the narrative of Pago Pago is one of persistent existence and quiet triumph. The Pacific Ocean, which for so long was seen as a barrier that isolated the islands from the troubles of the outside world, is now viewed with a more realistic appreciation for the connections and the vulnerabilities it brings. The territory has embraced its role within the larger regional and national framework, accepting the complexities of its identity and the responsibilities that come with its position in the modern world. The tragedy of July 2010 did not mark the end of the American Samoan story. It was a profound, painful transition that facilitated a new, more grounded chapter of their existence. The islands remain a place of vibrant culture, deep traditions, and a community that has proven its ability to weather the most severe of storms, emerging with a clearer vision and an unshakable commitment to the values of justice, duty, and communal care. The story of Major Lisla Brown is thus enshrined as a central element of this resilience, a symbol of the ultimate sacrifice and the enduring spirit of the people he gave his life to protect. The final realization of this study is the understanding that while we cannot prevent the occurrence of all tragedies, we can, through our choices and our commitments, determine the long-term impact that such events have on our society. The people of American Samoa chose, in the face of their darkest hour, to stand together and to reaffirm their commitment to the laws and the values that define their community. They chose to build, to reform, and to remember, creating a future that is shaped by the tragedy but not defined by it. The plaza stands today as a place where life continues, a space where the rhythm of the government and the community harmonizes with the beauty of the surrounding volcanic landscape. The ghost of that morning has been integrated into the calm, purposeful reality of the territory's present. They are a community that has looked into the abyss and, rather than falling, has used the experience to solidify their standing, demonstrating to all who observe them that the light of human decency and the rule of law is a potent, resilient force that will always outlast the shadow of a solitary act of violence. This is the lasting legacy of the tragedy, a testament to the power of a resilient, unified society, standing in the heart of the Pacific, continuing the noble work of protecting the peace they hold so dear, and honoring the memory of those who fell by living lives that are worthy of the sacrifice they made for the home they loved. The territory endures, the community persists, and the story of Pago Pago remains an essential, inspiring chapter in the history of human perseverance, proving that even when the light is momentarily extinguished, the capacity for renewal and the commitment to a just and stable future will always, in time, reclaim the center stage of our existence, ensuring that the legacy of those we honor is forever written into the vibrant, ongoing life of the community they cherished and served with everything they had. The finality of this 11-part examination brings us back to the fundamental nature of memory and the quiet, persistent duty of those who remain to curate the history of a tragedy. In the context of American Samoa, the legacy of the 2010 massacre is not merely recorded in legal documents or archived news reports, it is lived in the ongoing, daily life of the territory. The passage of 16 years since the day Major Lucilla Brown and his colleagues were targeted has allowed the sharp, jagged edges of the initial shock to be softened by the continuous, rolling rhythm of island life, yet the core truth of that morning remains untouched. The territory has effectively moved into a period of post-traumatic reconstruction where the focus has shifted from reactive measures to the quiet, dignified maintenance of a societal order that honors the past without being held hostage by it. The plaza, now fully reclaimed by the daily business of governance, serves as a silent witness to this process, its concrete pathways bearing no physical marks of the violence, yet it remains imbued with the memory of the change that occurred there. The strength of this recovery lies in the refusal to let the tragedy become a source of division or chronic instability, choosing instead to use it as an anchor for a more cohesive and professional approach to public life. The institutional transformation that was forced upon the police department and the judicial branch remains the most visible and significant artifact of the event. It is a testament to the fact that when a system is violently broken, the act of rebuilding offers an opportunity to rectify deep-seated limitations that might have otherwise remained ignored for generations. The current state of security in Pago Pago is a reflection of this maturation, characterized by a sophisticated understanding of the multifaceted threats present in the contemporary world. This professionalization has not come at the cost of the island's unique cultural character, but rather has strengthened it, providing the security necessary for their traditions and community bonds to flourish. The officers who serve today do so with a heightened sense of awareness that is not rooted in a perpetual state of alert, but in a professional commitment to ensuring that the tragedy of 2010 remains a unique, isolated incident in the territory's timeline. This achievement is a credit to the leadership of the police force, the ongoing support of the community, and the persistent work of individuals who have dedicated their lives to ensuring that the tragedy is never repeated. Reflecting on the philosophical weight of the event, one must acknowledge the inherent difficulty in maintaining a democratic, law-abiding society in the face of sudden, extreme malice. The assassination of a major figure is designed to shatter the belief in the safety and the order of a community, and in this respect, the act achieved its immediate, devastating goal. However, the true measure of a society is not in the absence of such events, but in the aftermath. By holding firmly to the requirements of the law and refusing to be drawn into the chaos that the perpetrator intended to incite, the people of American Samoa demonstrated a profound commitment to the democratic process. The struggle with the death penalty, while personally painful for many, was a crucial part of this commitment. It was a rigorous, difficult, and often frustrating exercise in upholding the rule of law when it would have been easier to act on the raw, immediate impulse for retribution. That they navigated this period and emerged with a more stable, legally grounded system is a significant victory for the territory's democratic character. The role of the victim's family and the survivors in this historical narrative cannot be overstated, as they have provided the emotional and moral compass for the entire community's recovery. Their ability to voice their grief, to demand accountability through the proper legal channels, and to participate in the life of the island in the years since has provided a powerful, living example of resilience. They have shown that while the loss is permanent and the pain of the event can never be truly fully resolved, the act of living with integrity and purpose is the most effective response to the destruction of a life. The public recognition of these individuals as the true custodians of the memory of the tragedy has served to unify the island in a way that goes beyond simple sentimentality. It is a profound acknowledgement of the shared values that define the people of American Samoa. Their endurance is the primary engine of the territory's collective healing, a silent, persistent force that ensures the tragedy is remembered not with paralyzing fear, but with a grounded, solemn respect. As we conclude this examination, we must recognize that the narrative of Pago Pago is not a closed book, but an ongoing record of a community's interaction with the darkest aspects of the human experience. The territory continues to evolve, facing new challenges that are dictated by the changing global landscape, yet it does so from a position of hardened wisdom. The lessons learned in the wake of the 2010 massacre, the importance of institutional preparedness, the necessity of community cohesion, and the vital role of the rule of law have become embedded in the institutional and cultural DNA of the islands. The memory of Major Lucilla Brown is no longer a haunting echo of violence. It is a guiding light that informs the ongoing work of every public servant who walks across the plaza. His life and his sacrifice have been woven into the very fabric of the territory's future, ensuring that the work of protection and service continues with a renewed and unshakable sense of purpose. The tragedy is and will always be a part of the history of the islands, but it is no longer the event that dictates their potential. It is the event that tested their resolve and ultimately affirmed their strength. In the final assessment, the story of American Samoa's response to the tragedy of 2010 is a source of hope for any community facing the prospect of upheaval. It teaches that while violence is a sudden, physical act, peace is a slow, spiritual, and systemic achievement. The territory's ability to move through the darkness of their ordeal and emerge on the other side with their institutions intact and their communal spirit strengthened is a feat that deserves to be studied and honored. They have demonstrated that the capacity for recovery is inherent in the human experience when that experience is grounded in duty, protected by law, and sustained by the mutual care of the community. The Pago Pago of today is a place of life, a place where the memory of the past is held with dignity, but where the focus is firmly fixed on the future. The volcanic slopes, the azure waters, and the quiet dignity of the streets all stand as testament to the resilience of a people who have survived their greatest challenge and found in that survival a deeper, more profound connection to the values they hold dear. The legacy of Major Lucilla Brown remains the most important element of this long narrative, not just as a symbol of sacrifice, but as a standard-bearer for the type of society that American Samoa continues to strive to become. His life, cut short by an act of senseless hate, has been honored by the life of the community that refused to be defeated by that hate. Every police officer who patrols, every judge who sits in court, and every citizen who works to maintain the peace of the islands is, in their own way, participating in the ongoing act of honoring the memory of the one who was lost. The tragedy was an interruption of their peace, but it was not the end of their story. The territory's existence is an ongoing testament to the fact that light, truth, and the commitment to one another will always remain the most powerful forces in the human condition. As we end this account, the memory of that morning in July 2010 remains, not as an open wound, but as a foundational truth that allows the people of American Samoa to move forward with a secure, clear, and unshakable belief in their own future, standing together as a community that has known the darkness, survived the storm, and continues, every day, to build a home that is worthy of the peace they have worked so hard to preserve and to cultivate for the generations yet to come. The record is complete, the memory is secure, and the spirit of the territory remains, as it always has been, resilient, united, and profoundly enduring in the face of all things, continuing the noble, vital, and never-ending work of building a life that celebrates the dignity of every individual and the enduring strength of the community as a whole.